The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Sunak and Truss are urged to step up plans to deal with the worsening cost of living emergency.
A very good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 16th of August. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Rosie Wright.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will face off tonight at another leadership hustings, this time in Perth, where they will be pressurised to be more ambitious when it comes to plans to tackle the cost of living.
Well, the hospitality industry has written an open letter to the government calling for more support in the face of what it calls an existential emergency. Hundreds of pubs and restaurants, it says, are on the brink of closure.
Thunderstorms have begun hitting the country. You may have well been involved in one. As the heat wave draws to a close, the Met Office warns of torrential downpours, flooding and travel disruption. We'll have a weather forecast throughout the programme today, so stay tuned for that. Weather warnings do remain in place for most of the country until tomorrow.
And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex reportedly have no plans to see William and Kate when they fly to the UK next month. Harry and Meghan are returning to the country for a series of charity events, but why won't they meet their family?
I'm sure William and Kate will be gutted that their diary will be empty. There's going to be no knock on the door from the Sussexes. Couldn't you just say, no, sorry, we're not in? Boom. Imagine that. But anyway, you can join in any of our discussions. You can email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet as well, and that is?
At GB News.
So, pressure is increasing on the two candidates looking to become the next Prime Minister to come up with more ambitious plans to tackle the ongoing cost of living.
Well, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will face off again tonight at a hustings in Perth in Scotland in the wake of Labour announcing plans yesterday for a freeze on energy bills and a windfall tax.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. In the studio now, we have Adam Drummond. Adam is head of political and social research at Opinion Research. Adam, we want to get in there and find out what the recent polls are saying.
So it's probably going to be Liz Truss. That's basically what our Conservative members poll is showing. She's got a lead of about sort of 61 to 39% for Rishi Sunak. So everyone's kind of operating on the assumption that she's going to be the next Prime Minister. Labour obviously haven't come out with a big announcement on cost of living the other day. you would expect at least one of the two Tory candidates to be announcing something in the next couple of weeks. The question is, if you're Liz Truss and you're expecting to win that election, do you want to save it all up for the big announcement on the steps of Downing Street, or do you sort of give in to the pressure beforehand in the risk of Rishi Sunak perhaps announcing something that tries to...
So it's not as if she doesn't have anything up her sleeve. You think with that sort of lead, it is hers to blow?
Potentially, yes. Although the measures that they've announced so far don't seem to be in the same league as what Labour's announced. So that's certainly putting some pressure on to sort of up the game in terms of the scale of what they might want to announce.
When we look at how the two candidates are rating with the public, can you see a sort of correlation between big policy announcements or hustings or media appearances and then a shift in the dial?
I think possibly more media appearances. So one of the big changes we've seen is that Truss's ratings have gone up throughout the campaign, partly as there's been a lot of supported media coverage of her compared to a lot of her rivals, especially when it was in the MP stage. We saw lots of negative headlines about Penny Mordaunt, for example. So Truss's ratings have gone up. In the first debate, she came out really poorly, but her performances since then have been better. Conservative voters have rallied round her to an extent, and her ratings on all sorts of different attributes, like being a strong leader or being compassionate, etc., those have all gone up quite significantly among Tory voters as they've started to see her as sort of one of their own.
What Liz Truss is less keen on is governmental intervention on energy prices. In other words, whatever we pay out now will have to be taxed upon later. Do you get any reflection in your polling that people are concerned? I mean, we've been through this, of course, through the furlough scheme and whatever, which was all very nice at the time, but people realise it had to be paid for.
Yeah, there's one of the things that struck me throughout the whole of the pandemic was we were doing focus groups at various different points for different clients. There would always be at least one person. So there would be a general acknowledgement, yes, it's good the government's done this, the furlough scheme, it's good that the government is helping people in this difficult time. There would always be at least one person who would make the point quite rightly that at some point this is going to have to be paid for. So the question at the moment is, yes, there is a lot of positive poll results about the idea of helping people out with bills. The question is whether or not that same argument that this is going to have to be paid for has also cut through, or whether the public see it as a similar kind of emergency situation where we'll figure it out later, something just has to be done now. And there is some evidence that it is that, but it's a tricky thing to actually ask people about because you get different kinds of responses depending on how you ask the question.
Okay. We want to bring in Jane Hawkes now. Jane's in Gloucestershire this morning. And you are a consumer champion, Jane. And you're listening to what Adam's saying and what the polls are saying, what the research is saying and what people think about that. What pressure do you think the two candidates are under to put forward proposals to outline their plans to curb the fuel and energy crisis?
Yeah, I think the announcement yesterday shows it's a kind of call to action to Liz Truss and to Rishi Sunak to actually make a clear, workable, long-term strategy. It does seem quite short-term what's been suggested at the moment, and we don't need any sticky plaster solutions now. We need something that people can believe in, that they can have confidence in. And that will increase that consumer confidence. It is an all-time low, and it's interesting to see how he's focused it on help for all as opposed to targeted help. But what we have seen from the Institute of Fiscal Studies is those with the least find that prices are rising the highest. So if you look at that in rates of inflation, in terms of rates of inflation, then that's a sort of 18% inflation for the poorest fifth of the population and 11 for the lowest, for the highest. So we do need to, I think it's challenging them to come up with something that is credible, believable, and we are looking for leadership at this time. And when we don't have it, we're in this very insecure environment, and that needs to change.
If we listen to the polling that Adam's just laid out to us, it seems very clear that Liz Truss is, miles ahead of Rishi Sunak in the polls. Given that, do you think she'll be able to provide that leadership you just described, something that's credible, come the 5th of September?
Well, we can but hope. And I think that's the problem, that, hope is also being eroded all the way through. And every time we have a kind of belief, in a solution, that there is something that we can do, then another counter argument is brought into play. And I think it would be better to see the leaders united in a strategy in order to be able to restore that consumer confidence. And we do need answers now, rather than 2 weeks. In 2 weeks' time, as we go into September, it's too late for some people who are they've already exhausted every option that they have in order to get by. They've tried everything, and people are trying everything. They're trying every little thing, and every little thing really does help. And I know that we need to look forward, and I know we need to wait for whatever is out of our control at the moment, as in decisions that are going to be made. But we can, in our own ways, make our own changes now, and those small changes are important.
What do you think those small changes should be? I mean, just generally, that would apply to most people, that would actually make a difference at the end of the day, because it is, Jane, I have to say, it's very depressing listening to you. And are you without hope? Are you without hope? I mean, basically, have people underestimated just how bad this cost of living crisis is going to be over the next 2 years?
Well, I've always been a glass half full and an extra bottle somewhere. And I think that in this environment that we're in, we still need to keep that kind of positive outlook. But I don't think we should be blinkered to what's happening. I think we need to put procedures in place, put plans in place for ourselves. And if we are doing little things, and it sounds really, a lot of the money saving tips have always come across as quite patronising, like turn the lights off, buy a big jumper, things like that, and it does sound daft. But what we need to be doing is doing little things day by day that help us with our budget. We might not be able to do a 50-30-20 split on budget, so 50% on needs, 30% of our disposable income on wants, and 20% on sorting our debt or savings at the moment. We may have to adjust accordingly, but we can do little things in our everyday life that we have control over. We can use supermarket comparison apps to find the best prices for groceries. Try Priceable, for example. We can try Olio. We can share food to stop it going to waste. So we can try new things, and we can stick with what we have control over in our everyday lives to control our budgets.
Jane, I think there's two big things that are within people's control. They may not like it, but two big spending habits in the year. One is summer holiday, and the second is Christmas. Christmas is looming, and people just can't resist spending money at Christmas. It actually depresses me, the waste that goes on at Christmas. I wonder, am I an old humbug killjoy on this? But if you're going to save money, save it at Christmas.
There's just so much societal pressure, isn't there, to spend to make it
from
bigger.
Me this year. I'm just letting you know.
But do you know, I think people should have more conversations like that to say, do you know, the best thing we could give to each other is the promise to say, I'm not going to get you something. Please don't get something for me. Very good point. What do you think, Jane?
Yeah, well, I'm a big one, actually, when it comes up to the big C word in a few months' time, that there is far too much waste generally. So actually, I'm in complete agreement with you that actually this year, no, you don't need to buy me anything. It's just great that we're together as a family. And what we did learn during the pandemic is the importance of things like that. It's not just monetary, is it? But I think that the problem we're looking at holidays and big Christmas spending is we've got this percentage of the population that still, we can see people spending, and we can see people spending on things that we think are not essentials. And then we have people that are not able to get by from one day to the next. And that is a really weird kind of balancing act at the moment. And I think that needs to be straightened out in some way. And I don't know how that will happen, not an economist, but when I'm a consumer champion, and I just help people to make sense of their money and also to make the most of it in these times. So make sure that whatever you do spend your hard-earned money on is 100% worth it this year.
Okay, we're not actually saying cancel Christmas, but we're saying C for cutback, maybe a cutback Christmas. And C for children. Yeah. The C for children, as my mother says, they get too bloomin' much anyway. They They do. They get it from
Probably
aunties,
right.
uncles, brothers, sisters, parents, whatever. And then there's some of them, of course, who don't get anything. But anyway, look, we've got it out there. We've got the conversation out there. Jane, thank you very much indeed. I want to just say goodbye to you and wrap up with Adam Drummond here about, you heard what Jane has to say. She says she's a glass half full type person normally, but it is quite depressing out there. Overall, if you look at your polling and what opinion are coming up with, how are people looking ahead to the future? What would you say?
They're more pessimistic than they've been in some time. So we ask a number of questions about economic confidence and what do you expect to happen to your household finances or the economy generally in the next 12 months or so. They're as negative as I've seen them. Although, to be fair, we only started doing this shortly after, like, the Great Recession, after the financial crisis. So there hasn't been a comparable sort of period of like, economic unrest compared to now. But yeah, the number of people who say that they're struggling has gone up compared to the number of people who say they're comfortable and coping. So it is quite sort of pessimistic. There is just this general assumption that at some point the government is going to have to do something about energy bills, especially because the big scary thing about energy bills is that the big scary rise hasn't actually happened yet. It's forecast for January and for early next year. So there's just this baked-in assumption that something is going to be done to help with that because it is such a big, scary-looking number.
Okay. Adam, really appreciate it. Adam is the head of political and social research at Opinion Research. Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it.
Right now, it is 14 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories happening today. And a British teenager has died whilst on holiday in Turkey. The 14-year-old reportedly got into trouble swimming at the Liberty Lara Beach Hotel. He was pulled unconscious from the pool by the barman who attempted CPR before the boy was taken to hospital.
Ministry of Defence will stop controlling migrant operations in the Channel, the English Channel, early next year. The Royal Navy took over command and control functions in April as part of a plan to deal with the growing number of small boats crossing the waters.
The Royal College of Midwives is calling for more funding for maternity services as the number of midwives in England's dropped over the past year. The birth rate in England rose by more than 10,000 between 2020 and 21, according to the ONS. But NHS figures show the number of midwives has fallen by around 600.
We just want to bring you up to date now with the weather situation. We had the heat and now we are getting warnings that for people across England now, you've had this in Northern Ireland, you've had it in Scotland as well, now heading to England, thunderstorms, heavy rain over the course of the next few days.
Now, with storms, of course, come fears of flash flooding and disruption to infrastructure. Let's find out more because weather journalist Nathan Rao joins us in the studio. Thank you very much. Lots of us have been longing for some rain. This rain's come. It seems as though it's the wrong type of rain to deal with the drought that we've got, and actually it's potentially quite dangerous.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the problem because the ground is so dry at the moment. And what we need is long periods of sustained rainfall. And what we're actually going to get is explosive thunderstorm, heavy downpours. This rain, rather than soaking into the ground, is likely to run off. And this is why we're seeing warnings for flash flooding and problems with travel and power supplies and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Nathan, would it be possible, with thunderstorms come lightning, whatever, the ground is dry, but yet it's going to be wet. Could it be possible to still have fires while it's raining?
Well, this is an interesting question because, yes, lightning clearly can cause fires, but with the problems we've had at the moment with the wildfires that have been tearing across the country, the ground is very, very, very dry, and when you get wind that pushes that along, that's when you get those the fires raging across the country. When we've got rain and humidity, that tends to dampen it down a bit. So hopefully, at the moment, we might see the odd localised fire from lightning.
But the worst of that should be over.
Hopefully the worst of that should be over.
So a drought was declared at the end of last week. What would it take to say, right, that period of dry, we're now sort of out of the danger zone?
I think it's going to take a while for us to come out of the danger zone in terms of the drought because, as I mentioned, the only solution to this is long periods of sustained rainfall. And this is what we get in the winter and the autumn. to gear us up for the coming summer. And at the moment, we're already playing catch up because we're so low on water supplies that when the winter and the autumn and the winter come and we get that rainfall for next summer, we're already behind. So if we get another summer like this, then we are in trouble.
Yeah, and we're also in trouble if these water companies don't start digging holes in the ground. They're called reservoirs, really, because there is rain coming down. I know the rainfall in total is less than it used to be, but it's still coming down, and we're not catching it because it's hitting this ground. This ground is hard, and it's running off into rivers and into the sea.
Absolutely. And this is the problem. We get our water largely from aquifers, which were the underground water supplies, and they are only replenished by slow and sustained. It's the drizzle that us British people hate, that runs all the way through autumn and winter. That is replenishing our underground water supplies. This rainfall that we're going to get today and tomorrow, the heavy thundery downpours, that is simply a lot of it. Most of it is going to run off and cause the problem.
Why, my friend, is there thunder and lightning associated with that heavy rainfall?
Well, what we've got at the moment is a very unstable atmosphere. Because we've had such long periods of heat, we've now got an unstable atmosphere with low pressure coming in, a bit of cool air hitting warm air. That is going to go bang. And we get thunder, which is caused meteorologically. It's caused by a difference in polarity between the ground and the clouds, where all that energy builds, and that goes bang. And it's a huge electric charge that shoots down to the earth with the lightning, and the huge expansion of heat within the clouds that causes the bang.
Okay, so be aware of those flash floods. Nathan Rao, really appreciate it. Nathan's a weather journalist, and there you are, UK now being braced for several days of thunderstorms. Though you think the worst of this may be over by tomorrow?
Certainly in the main central northern England. Southern England is going to get more rain on Wednesday, but it's not like to be so thundery, and then we're going into a bit of a drier period throughout the end of the week. But then after that, who knows? Who knows?
OK, Nathan, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it. The time coming up to 6:20.
Coming up here on the programme, a tragic story. A man was stabbed to death in broad daylight in Oxford Circus. It's the fourth stabbing death in the capital in 3 days. We'll find out what's behind the violence. That after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. We saw some heavy showers yesterday. There'll be further showers and even some thunderstorms in places today, but they won't affect everyone. They'll be hit and miss. There'll be some drier weather around, although it will stay fairly humid in the south, whilst fresher weather is now arriving into the north and northwest. Now, low pressure is in charge, and two main areas to watch out for this morning. One area of rain affecting central and eastern Scotland. That tends to fizzle out during the day, but it's going to stay damp in places throughout the day. Showers also getting going quite early across southwest England, South Wales, and then more widely these will develop across much of the rest of England and Wales. They'll be slow moving. There's a risk of hail and gusty winds, as well as some intense rain in a short space of time. Of course, that falling onto hard ground means that there's the risk of flash flooding. It's still humid in the south, mid-20s, whilst it's much fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A drying up process here, with brighter skies arriving by the afternoon for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and those clearer conditions spreading south overnight. So for Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, mostly dry overnight with some clear spells and feeling cooler, 10 to 12 Celsius. Whilst it's still warm and humid across the rest of England as well as Wales, with further heavy showers continuing during the early hours of Wednesday, and a wet start particularly for the likes of the Midlands into central southern England, southwest England, South Wales. Further showers then get going across the southeast as well as East Anglia. Could be again some intense thunderstorms about, but once more they'll be hit and miss. However, a drier and brighter day is expected for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, and later on for parts of Wales and the southwest. The sun makes a reappearance here, but temperatures back to around average. So more typical UK weather emerging through the next few days after that thundery breakdown. I think it will stay changeable at the end of the week, but certainly a much cooler feel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up to 6:25, still to come, looking ahead at 6:45. More than 500,000 learners are still waiting for a driving test date. So do you remember your driving test? I mean, it's what's the word? It makes you nervous enough, but without getting a test and actually waiting for that test and knowing if you miss that test or fail that test, then it's going to be ages before you get another one.
Yeah, my advice would be pass first time.
You did?
Of course. Did
course.
you?
I think it's easy for women to pass first time. I do. Without being controversial.
That's very controversial. But we'll give you as well the sort of hacks to get round the system to make sure that as soon as there's a cancellation, you can get yourself in there. But also, the latest unemployment figures are going to be released just after 7 o'clock. We'll bring you the latest analysis here on the programme.
Okay, and remember, get in touch as you have been doing. You know how to do it. GBV's at GB News. You can tweet as well. John says, good morning, Eamonn and Rosie. I've worked out that just to have the washing machine and dryer on for my disabled son is going to work out £10 per time, and I will need it on roughly a minimum of 4 times a week. 4 times a week. I'm really dreading, I think that should be, my energy bills, and that's without any heating or electrics on. So what John's saying is it's really unavoidable for him.
Yeah, well, Archie said, I think the £400, that's currently what we're all going to get to help with our bills, has to increase to £900, says Archie, and no one earning more than £39,000 a year should get it. Also, take VAT off bills and the Green Levy if they do that, I think that will really help.
Yeah. Frank raises a very good point here, which no one likes talking about, and that is the foreign aid budget. Politicians are never honest about what the foreign aid budget is for. Is it from the goodness of their hearts? Is it an international rescue type policy that they can, help people all over the world? They won't tell you because basically it buys political influence. They don't want to cut it because it's not really there to provide food to starving people. It's there to buy Britain influence, and they don't want to tell you that. And he said the aid budget seems to be totally overlooked by all politicians. This would be a great help to UK's poorest. Absolutely. Absolutely. So why doesn't some politician come on and say exactly why they're not cutting foreign aid budget? You could say charity begins at home. Let us know your views on that one. Christmas we're talking about as well. Eamonn, with the big black cloud that has come over the country, thinking about the cost of living and Christmas holidays, I went to my local Tesco on Saturday and they're already selling big tubs of sweets like celebrations, as if they aren't trying to depress us enough already. So I suppose what you're saying, John, is they're putting them out there. The temptation is there. Should you be getting prepared for Christmas, or should you saying, I'm not going to have a big tub of celebrations this Christmas, or just think about the spirit of Christmas, what it's really for. I mean, it is about giving, but what way should that giving manifest itself? That's the thing.
All of that and much more to come. Do
I leave
keep
you
your views
speechless
coming
sometimes,
in.
don't I?
Well, sometimes.
Stevie, what am I going to say to that, she thinks? And I do think we should cut back on Christmas. Definitely think, and people will be happy with that, but how else are you going to save money?
Well, I think some people are already looking to October before even December to think, how am I going to get through that? So, you know, some people already are getting prepared for what's going to happen later on in the winter because knowing, you know, we were speaking earlier to Nathan, bills are going to skyrocket and, you know, the Labour Party came up with an interesting proposal yesterday, but they're not in government. So what are either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak going to do to help everybody combat the rising cost of living?
Awful situation in central London yesterday. A man stabbed to death, broad daylight, lunchtime. Another man's in custody after this. This was in Oxford Circus yesterday.
It's the fourth murder in the capital in just 3 days. England and Wales have reported a 10% increase in knife crime this year so far compared to last year.
OK, the Ben Kinsella Trust is an anti-knife crime charity, and the man who runs that, Patrick Green, joins us now. Patrick, there just seems to be no end to these sort of stories and the awfulness and the brazenness. We're talking about Oxford Circus, broad daylight, lunchtime.
It's tragic. As you said in your introduction, Eamonn, this is 4 murders in a very short period of time. And it's happening, as you say, in broad daylight in areas which are heavily populated. The tragic thing about this is it's not unusual. We know from talking to trauma surgeons in A&E that the peak time for hospital admissions for stabbings is between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m., the daylight hours. And it just shows you how brazen this is, how tragic this is. And, unfortunately, after knife crime during COVID, when we were all locked down, the numbers fell. It's rapidly returning to where we were in 2019, which was unfortunately a bleak year for us because it was the highest level of knife crime we've seen. And I fear we're slowly heading back in that direction.
It's the confidence, Patrick. It's how someone has the confidence to pull a knife or use a knife, or the stupidity or the hatred. I don't know how you would sum it up. I mean, are they not worried about being caught? Are they not worried about the punishment? Are they so consumed with hate or corruption that they're just blind to the consequences?
Eamonn, I think it's all of that and probably a lot more. It just shows the mentality of, which is behind some of these attacks, that the fact that it's happening with witnesses all around you is no deterrent to these attacks taking place. It is a bleak situation to consider. We're doing quite a lot to work with young people to deter young people from carrying knives, because it is. If we can stop people carrying knives, events like this can be avoided and will be avoided. But it is tragic, and we need to help the police in terms of the investigations that are ongoing, and we need to do far more to tackle this issue over a sustained period of time, which is what we haven't been doing over the last decade.
Of course, some of these people are carrying weapons because they're fearful themselves, and we know from the research that they're often then a victim to getting hurt with the weapon they were carrying. I think a lot of us hear stories like this and we assume it's to do with gang crime and that we couldn't get caught up in it. Is that always the case?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated picture, but you're very right, Rosie, in your introduction. For many, particularly young people, the idea that they may carry a knife is based on fear and about their perceptions that if they carry a knife, they can protect themselves. They're doing it in their own mind for self-defense. We all know this is the worst decision you could possibly make. You're not protecting yourself, you're putting yourself and those around you in danger. And part of our work as an educational charity is helping young people realise there are many other things that you can do that are much safer than carrying a knife to keep you and your friends safe. But these myths are perpetuated on social media. They're perpetuated through peers. That's why we need a really strong counter-narrative to talk to particularly young people about the fallacy that carrying a knife will protect you. And it's something we can all do. It's something we can do as parents. It's something we can do as leaders. It's something we can do as sports coaches. We have resources on our website, www.benkinsella.org.uk, free resources that can be downloaded by parents and youth leaders to work with young people, to educate them, to break this cycle that the young people think a knife could protect themselves. This is at the heart, I think, of turning the tide against knife crime, is creating a peer value system where young people will say, no, I won't carry a knife, and I will not let any of my friends carry a knife. That's part and parcel of tackling knife crime.
Well, Patrick, good luck to you. Good luck to the Ben Kinsella Trust and the work that you guys do and are trying to do, and this education and re-education of people. Just as we were talking to you, we were looking at various blades there, and they were so scary. The idea that somebody would feel that they wanted to use something like that, and they do. Obviously, it's awful. Patrick Green, thank you very much indeed. We say goodbye to you.
Thank you, Eamonn. Thank you.
Right, don't go anywhere. Very shortly, we're going to be going through the day's newspapers, finding the stories that you might have missed. That's after this.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, this is how it works for us this morning. We're going through the newspapers now. Arts and culture broadcaster, top woman, Stephanie Tetchy with us, and columnist at The Article, Ali Mirage, who's a favourite of my wife's, which is why he's here today. Basically, you got the blessing from her.
That's good. I got the nod.
You got the nod. That was it. We're going to talk about the State of the Union here as it relates to Liz Truss. Ali, what have you got?
Well, this is on the front page of the Express, Eamonn. Truss, I will fight off bid to split union. And she's basically saying that she is going to reject Nicola Sturgeon's call for a second referendum. And there's a big spread inside. Truss, I will deliver for all of our country. There she is, looking very prime ministerial already. You heard that your pollster a little bit earlier saying that she's streets ahead. Well, we'll see, but certainly seems to be going in the right direction on her campaign. And look, this Scottish independence thing is not going away, and for two reasons, really. One is that Nicola Sturgeon, when they lost the last referendum campaign, at that point, Brexit had not happened. That was one thing. And the second thing that's really put Nicola Sturgeon in a different light was her handling of COVID, front and centre, pretty much every day of those press conferences. So I think she's using both of those things as a means to ramp up this a call for a second referendum. And also, she's still doing very well in terms of electoral seats in the Scottish Parliament. So it's difficult to see how Truss could keep kicking this into long grass forever. But the question, if I was Truss, I would be asking the Scottish nationalists is, where is the border going to be if there is an independent Scotland? Are you really going to put up a border at Berwick-upon-Tweed with all the issues in the Northern Ireland Protocol that we've had? Everyone's an armchair expert now on borders. And the second thing is, what currency are you going to have? So I would just take the gloves off with the nationalists and ask them those questions.
And talking about taking the gloves off, Liz Truss and Nicola Sturgeon, it's been quite turbulent over the last few weeks.
It has, and look, they're both very strong ladies. It's going to be very interesting if Liz Truss does become Prime Minister to see how that dynamic evolves. But I think the key question for Sturgeon's going to be, look, you can't keep calling for a referendum indefinitely. The problem for Truss is, how long can she keep that desire for that referendum in the long grass, not accede to it? Because ultimately, if the Scottish people do at some point, well, I mean, they said it was for a generation. Hasn't been a generation yet, but there were circumstances, Brexit, particularly COVID as well, that have showed that, you know, the Scots want to go down their own road. But the interesting thing is, if Nicola Sturgeon wants to join the EU, I would find it very odd if Spain, by the way, all the countries in the EU would have to agree to this accession, if Spain would agree to it, given its own separatist problems in Catalonia. I can't see it happening.
OK, your view's very welcome. Stephanie, so Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in a surprise return next month to the UK.
Yeah, much to everyone's delight, well, my delight more than anything, they have announced that they'll be coming back next month because they want to support the charities that are close to their hearts. So on September 5th, they'll be attending the One Young World Summit, where Meghan will be doing a speech. Then they'll be going to Germany for the 1 year to go for the Invictus Games. And then they'll be returning for the Well Child Awards in London on September 8th.
That's going to sound a bit hollow to some people, like Susan, for example, who's messaged in this morning, good morning, who says, can't believe they have the nerve to come to Britain for charity events. I assume they're just trying to create images for their next Netflix appearance.
No, I don't think that is the case. I think, you know, from day one, Meghan and Harry have always been about good causes and supporting stuff that mean a lot to them. And I think Meghan and Harry, no matter what they do, they're always going to face criticism from the UK public. For me, it gets a bit boring sometimes because I'm like, we have to move and push the narrative on with Harry and Meghan. It's like, whatever they do, they can't do nothing right. And you know what? Harry is still a royal. He still has a right to commit to causes that he wants to commit to. Meghan is his wife, so she's always going to be a part of that. And it just gets draining sometimes seeing all the criticism that they face. I know, you know, there's no smoke without fire, but, you know, how long can we keep on doing this? For the next 10 years, every time they say they're going to come back to the UK, there's going to be a big problem for them.
Well, there is a big problem because they say we don't want to live in the UK, so why are they coming back to the UK? And that feeds people's cynicism, I suppose, with that. There is this thing, where do they stay when they come back to the UK as well?
Yeah.
So you've probably heard that it's on the Windsor estate,
yes,
but very close to, what's his name, William
and
Kate. But
who they're going to be at the Adelaide Cottage, which is their new place that they're moving to. But people are saying they're not actually going to meet up because obviously, as we know, the brothers have a bit of a frosty relationship. And I don't think, you know, the Platinum Jubilee, they stayed as far away from each other as possible. So I don't think anything's going to be mended in that relationship anytime soon. But, you know, we'll be surprised. Maybe stuff does happen behind closed door that is not in the public glare. Maybe there are secret conversations and secret meetups which are not highlighted.
OK. Ali, air chaos. This is front page of the Mail, and Heathrow's extended its limitation on passengers right through to the end of October.
That's right. This is this 100,000 flights cap per week that they've extended to October, which could affect the October half-term. And it's the Daily Mail is saying air chaos to hit half-term. Up to 1 million travellers could face new flight cancellations as Heathrow extends daily passenger cap to end of October. Now, this is John Holland-Kaye, the CEO of Heathrow, basically saying that this is being caused by a shortage of ground handlers in particular. They're only at 70% of the number that they actually need. And this is obviously going to cause consternation to travellers who are trying to get their plans, back to kind of normal again. And a lot of people have been going on holiday after over 2 years locked up at home. So we've seen the problems at the airports. I must say I've travelled from Heathrow and from other airports a number of times in the last couple of months. I've been lucky, actually, that I haven't had any problems, but then I haven't checked in any luggage. And I've travelled light, so it's probably a good thing to do if you can do that, but that's obviously not possible if you're going for an extended trip. But there's no end of this in sight. It could potentially, according to John Holland Kay, last until next year, which is a sobering thought. But at least we are flying again.
Well, some of the airlines are pretty angry as well because they can't run as many flights as they'd need to. Who ultimately is to blame for this? Because there's
Heathrow.
such a...
Yeah.
Heathrow.
But
John Holland Kay, the very man who says it's all working. I mean, he totally got this completely wrong in terms of what his staffing should be and the volume of traffic going through Heathrow Airport.
Well, I think if you look at what happened in COVID, I mean, some airports had their passenger numbers down to between 0 and 5% of the numbers that they were in 2019. There was a massive decline in traffic. And then it was quite easy for us to, now criticise airports, and I understand that there is a lot of frustration out there, but perhaps they should have kept people on furlough longer rather than let them go. Other people have resigned because they felt that during the pandemic they could find better jobs on the back of that than working in a pretty stressful industry for quite relatively low pay. So there are a number of reasons for this. It's a perfect storm. Demand has come back in a resurgent way that many didn't predict it would come back so strongly. So you've got resurgent demand. People perhaps should have been furloughed that weren't, and also people were resigning. So it's just one of those things. I think it's going to take a while to work through. Look, the airports need to do their bit. The airlines also need to do their bit too. But I think there's going to be some of this disruption for some months to come.
One of the big problems that we have in the country are big airports like Heathrow, massive airports like that. I flew out of Southampton recently, an absolute joy. You fly out of Belfast, an absolute joy. Fly out of Leeds, an absolute joy. Well, there's big queues there, there were queues there. But these mega airports like Heathrow and Gatwick, I honestly believe that's not the way to go. There should be more airports and smaller airports.
It just feels like lucky dip when it comes to holidays now because, up to 1 million seats are going to be gone now due to this ban.
And this is not just holidays. I was flying back from Belfast to London 2 weeks ago, flight cancelled.
And it's like, what's the solution? And it feels horrible for holidaymakers because it's like, we've had a summer of discontent and now they're saying maybe before October this is going to be released, and I doubt it. So Christmas is also going to be a busy period, and it'll be sad if people have to miss out on Christmas holidays as well.
Well, do you know, Stephanie says that, Ali, about, it'll be sad if people have to cancel Christmas holidays. I mean, when I was young and growing up, nobody went on holiday at Christmas, right? Yeah. So this is a whole sort of London middle-class thing that we go off skiing or we go to Biarritz or wherever we go to at Christmas. And as for this October half-term business as well, we talk about this crisis, this cost of living crisis people are going through. Well, it's not stopping them flying away during the summer and October and Christmas. They all seem to want to have an appetite to do all that sort of thing. When did that ever just become normal to do that?
Well, I think in the era of low-cost travel, a lot of people have availed themselves of that. Look, I mean, obviously everyone has their own particular circumstances. One can't comment on everyone's thing. A lot of people booked their holidays early and they were deferred and they're going on holiday now. That's not the case for everyone. And certainly cost of living issues, everyone's got their own circumstances to take into account.
And oil prices as well. I mean, Mike O'Leary basically said that era of the very low-cost flight just won't exist anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank goodness for that. There's a lot of people in airports that shouldn't be in airports. I walk through airports and you know the people who shouldn't be in airports are the people who look up in the sky. They look up like this. They're looking at notices. You think, get out of the way, get out of the way. But you see, actually, I don't believe this headline front of the Mail, air chaos to hit half term. It's actually not going to be chaos because if they trim back in time and everybody knows what's happening, the whole system will work much better.
Exactly, and I think that's right. It's about forward planning, and it is disappointing if you can't get a flight, or indeed if you have your flight cancelled, but it's much better to know way in advance that that's the case. You can make alternative plans. Or indeed enjoy the British countryside.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah.
Shall we quickly talk about looming results? Lots of nervous teenagers and their parents, I'm sure, this week in anticipation. But there's a story front page of the Telegraph.
Yes, there is. So Thursday is the big day for most students when they receive their A-level results. But it's going to be a different kettle of fish for affluent A-level pupils, because universities now are putting on focus on accepting pupils who come from more disadvantaged backgrounds. So if you are from a well-off area, a well-off family, you may find yourself waiting to be accepted for a place for university. While I like this idea, I do hate the idea of tokenism, in the sense where it's like every student should be accepted based on merit, I feel. And even for me, I went to quite elitist university in the arts. I didn't apply through normal form application, I went through clearing. But then when I found myself there, I found myself being surrounded by all rich people, and that was kind of...
Are you not from a rich family? Are you not from a posh background?
No, I wish I was.
Right.
Fake it till you make it. But no, I'm not. I'm from a working class family. So when I found myself in surrounded by such people, it's a shock to the system. So while it's good that you are accepting such pupils in there, they have to think, how are they going to face with the culture of that university life, and will they excel?
God, I hate the class system in this country. I mean, I'll tell you. I mean, I never went to tertiary education. Well, I did journalism course, but I didn't go to university. I could have gone to university, but throughout this industry, particularly in news, it's just the prerequisite to be from Oxford or Cambridge, to simply sit there at a news desk and look and say, let's go to our reporter, Stephanie. What's the latest? So I should have gone to Oxford or Cambridge to be able to say that. You know, it's a lot of nonsense.
Yeah, I actually feel... I kind of agree with Stephanie on this. I feel very comfortable with this thing. I think we're all very well aware of the importance of social mobility, of helping kids from different backgrounds who may not have had the best start in life climb up the ladder. Social mobility is very important, but there used to be a thing called grammar schools in this country.
You took the words out of my mouth, mate.
They're a real vehicle for that. Now, a lot of sharp-elbowed parents, move to expensive areas to get their kids into the best grammar schools, and in fact, grammar schools are dominated in the south. There are hardly any but there are actually none in the north of England. Northeast of England.
Well, in Northern Ireland, we have a great stock of grammar schools, and I am completely working class, from a very working class area. And my life changed that I passed the 11 plus and went to a grammar school.
Yeah, exactly. But you see, Eamonn, a lot of the thing was that, you can't label kids at 11. Well, my argument would be they should have another chance at 13.
I was lucky, I suppose.
They should have another chance at 13, another chance at 16. They don't have to just have one chance at 11. But the bottom line is you need to have high standards. If you're dumbing down, what are we doing to our kids? Well, they get to university and they get into the real world and they're still going to struggle then.
They will.
I think the most important education is primary education, primary school, and then that secondary situation where instead of lowering the bar, we should keep the bar high, because education liberates people in so many ways. And I'm glad to hear your story as well, how your life is different because of it. Guys, could I just finish on this story, because it's a sort of hygiene thing that's been bothering me, because in the cost of living crisis, we've got a story running here in many of today's newspapers that apparently you can beat the cost of living crisis by buying, wait for it, reusable toilet paper. I kid you not,
That's
right?
That's a big no for me.
So what you can have is a company called Net Zero, Ali. They're flogging cloth loo roll, £21.50 a roll. So basically you can use it and then put it in the washing machine.
Yeah, it sounds a bit gross, to be honest.
Who comes up with these ideas? Seriously, I saw a clip of it yesterday on Instagram and I just thought, this is a bit too far. Come on, recycle bottles, but recycle loo roll? Like, loo roll's already a messy situation with it, and yet to have to recycle it again and use it, it's too far. And come on, how much is it? £21.50?
£21.50.
No, sorry.
And also probably, loo roll's one of those things that as long as it's tissue paper, whatever, it's biodegradable.
Yeah.
It's not the worst polluter of the planet, I would have thought. So, Stephanie, I'm taking it that's a no?
It's a no for me. I'm all up for recycling, but I just think sometimes it's pushing it too far on what should be recycled. And it's a messy business with loo roll.
Messy. Rosie?
Well, I'm just thinking, people used to reuse nappies,
yes,
didn't
I was
they?
thinking that.
So it's not really different at all.
Well, except it's the difference between baby poop an adult poop, isn't it?
But it's significantly less
Significantly more
than it would be in a nappy.
Yeah. Well,
What a vision.
We don't
What a
like
vision
the
we've given you
idea.
at 10 to 7.
We deal with all the high-level issues here, don't we?
Yeah.
Guys, thank you very much indeed. Alan and Stephanie, they're going to be back in about 40 minutes' time. Look forward to that.
Now, figures have shown that over 500,000 learner drivers are still waiting to book their driving test.
Well, the DVLA is struggling to clear this backlog. They say it's caused by the coronavirus pandemic and a shortage of examiners. Why does the pandemic lead to a shortage of driving test examiners? Amazing. Your average wait will be about 3 months now, OK? Joining us with more on this, Quentin Wilson, motoring journalist, transport campaigner. How the heck has this come about, Quentin?
And then you've got things like 50% of people fail. So, you know, you need another 200,000 retests, and that's taking up extra capacity. People come and they don't have the documents for their car, or they don't bring the provisional license or the MOT or the insurance, and the test gets cancelled. You've also got AI programs now where you can search for a retest. And then people do this and then they don't show up for tests and things like that. So you add all this stuff together and we have a huge backlog, which in some cities, Birmingham, Manchester, London, you're having to wait 6 months. So for this cohort of kids who have had it so bad through the pandemic, and you were talking earlier on about exam results, it's miserable for them because, you know, having a driving license means that you have opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have if you don't, in terms of jobs and education and leisure. So we need to do everything we can to support them. But this is nothing new, Eamonn. I mean, I was writing stories about long waiting lists for driving tests in 2015, 2016, 2017. We need to make this system much better. And I think it's underpinned by the problem that as a society, we do not value driving instructors. It's like lorry drivers. You know, they are an invisible addition to society that aren't appreciated and aren't rewarded properly. So, you know, if you want to get these numbers down and you want to get more examiners and more instructors, then we have to cherish driving instructors, pay them properly, and you know, incentivize them to come into the industry to train, because they are the kind of bulwark against, you know, bad driving. I'm in France right now, and you know, the driving standards are woeful. We're very lucky that we've got high driving standards in the UK, but we need to make it better. And we need to say that driving instructors are a really important part of the social fabric.
So if we don't have driving teachers, we're not going to have driving tests then?
No, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, we need to have more examiners, and the DVSA, to their credit, have tried to recruit more, but it takes a long time to train them. And they're operating at weekends and things like this and trying to get this down. But you've got this huge backlog of kids who had to wait. When the tests and lessons restarted, it was still with COVID protocols where you had to disinfect the car and put on masks and all this. And this made this backlog worse. So the whole system does need an overhaul, because we've been talking about this for too long, and we need to make sure that we can process all these things quickly. And my advice to kids who want to get a test appointment, and my daughter passed her test earlier this year, and my wife was just completely resolute and went onto the DVSA website and just constantly refreshed the button again and again and again, and eventually came up with an appointment the next day. Now, luckily, she was ready to take a test, but do that and you stand a chance of beating the waiting list. What you must not do is go on these third-party driving test appointment websites where they just try and soak up all these appointments with with an AI program much faster than you can. And that's also slowing things down. So go on the DVSA website and just sit there for, I'm afraid it's going to be a couple of hours every day, maybe, and just keep refreshing until you get that appointment.
You and me probably did our tests about the same year, same time.
A long time ago.
Yeah, I think it was 1979. I think 79. I did mine. You don't mind me asking, did you get yours first time?
Yes, I did, Eamonn. I did indeed.
Well,
then I did a program for the BBC, How to Fail Your Driving Test, and failed. So we can laugh about this, but it's really, really important. And the driving instructors and examiners in this country do a fantastic job. We just need to appreciate them more.
Okay.
So the message for the DVSA is to incentivize people to come into the industry.
Good man. Okay. Thank you very much, Quentin. Good on highlighting that. And who would be a driving test examiner or a driving school instructor? That's the thing. Quentin Wilson, thank you very much indeed. There's so many things, Rosie, so many things as a result of this pandemic. I just cannot believe how society has changed in so many ways, that we can't get truck drivers, we can't get cab drivers, we can't get instructors, what has happened to the world?
And some people need their driving test result and their ability to drive to take on a job. So there's this really, really challenging, or just, ferry their family around.
Yeah. So he got his first time, you got yours first time.
What happened to you? No. How?
It was discrimination, really.
No,
I think that's what it was.
Not. That's 5 times. That's very expensive to fail.
Very expensive. But I think the idea was they looked at young men and they thought, too cocky. The young girls come in and they go, oh, yeah, she's very nice and whatever. And
absolute
sweet. She's like Mary Poppins coming in there. We'll give her.
You must have got loads of majors.
What?
You must have got loads of majors. Made some real, blunders.
I doubt it.
Well, you didn't pass.
Yeah, but there's probably reasons for it anyway. Let's take the break.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. We saw some heavy showers yesterday. There'll be further showers and even some thunderstorms in places today, but they won't affect everyone. They'll be hit and miss. There'll be some drier weather around, although it will stay fairly humid in the south, whilst fresher weather is now arriving into the north and northwest. Now, low pressure is in charge, and 2 main areas to watch out for this morning. One area of rain affecting central and eastern Scotland. That tends to fizzle out during the day, but it's going to stay damp in places throughout the day. Showers also getting going quite early across southwest England, South Wales, and then more widely, these will develop across much of the rest of England and Wales. They'll be slow moving. There's a risk of hail and gusty winds, as well as some intense rain in a short space of time. Of course, that falling onto hard ground means that there's the risk of flash flooding. It's still humid in the south, mid-20s, whilst it's much fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A drying up process here, with brighter skies arriving by the afternoon for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and those clearer conditions spreading south overnight. So for Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, mostly dry overnight with some clear spells and feeling cooler, 10 to 12 Celsius. Whilst it's still warm and humid across the rest of England as well as Wales, with further heavy showers continuing during the early hours of Wednesday, and a wet start, particularly for the likes of the Midlands into central southern England, southwest England, South Wales. Further showers then get going across the southeast as well as East Anglia. Could be, again, some intense thunderstorms about, but once more they'll be hit and miss. However, a drier and brighter day is expected for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, and later on for parts of Wales and the southwest. The sun makes a reappearance here, but temperatures back to around average. So more typical UK weather emerging through the next few days after that thundery breakdown. I think it will stay changeable at the end of the week, but certainly a much cooler feel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints over a drink, we have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Faro.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are urged to step up with plans to deal with the worsening cost of living.
Hello there, very good morning to you. Just after 7 o'clock, it's Tuesday the 16th of August. You're tuned into breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Rosie Wright.
Well, here's what's leading the news today. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak are going to pitch to the country tonight again at another hustings in Perth in Scotland as they face mounting pressure to be more ambitious when it comes to the cost of living crisis.
Good news for Britain's workforce. Well, we'll have the latest employment figures for you and find out what this means for the economy. They're just coming out.
Parents across the UK are being left in the lurch somewhat after a number of nurseries have closed because of financial pressures and staff shortages. We'll find out what support there is out there.
And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex reportedly have no plans to see William and Kate when they fly to Britain next month. Harry and Meghan are returning for a series of charity events.
Now, please do get in touch with us, particularly what do you want to see from Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak on how they could handle the cost of living. And maybe you've got views on Harry and Meghan too. gbviews at gbnews.uk or drop us a tweet as well at gbnews.
And just a lot of you, we were talking about foreign aid earlier, and Billy says all foreign aid should be stopped. It should be British aid first. It seems that our own people are always at the back of the queue. Stefan says foreign aid is indeed to buy political influence. The problem is quite a few countries don't need the money, and a very big majority are corrupt countries. So while we are suffering a cost of living crisis and struggling to pay rent and mortgages, our taxpayers' money goes elsewhere instead of helping people in Britain first.
We're talking about pressure increasing on the two candidates looking to become the next Prime Minister to come up with more ambitious plans to tackle the ongoing cost of living.
Well, Truss and Sunak will face off again tonight, this time in Perth in Scotland, in the wake of yesterday's Labour announcement for a freeze in energy bills and a windfall tax.
Well, what needs to be done to tackle the cost of living crisis, and what do the public and who do they support? Well, joining us again in the studio, Adam Drummond, Head of Political and Social Research and Opinion Polling. Really appreciate your time. Now, yesterday there was a bit of a gear change because the Labour Party came up with a very different policy. They said, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to cap the energy bills that you could all be paying for. It's not something that either of the Conservative candidates had pitched yet. How much does an announcement like that from the opposition shift the way the public view the current government?
So we're going to have to wait and see whether this has an impact on things like voting intentions. So at the moment, the key thing to remember, obviously, is that Truss and Sunak are pitching for the votes of Tory party members, so rather than the general public at large. So something that's really popular with the general public might not necessarily have the same appeal among Tory members. But Tory members aren't actually as different from the general public as often said. So they're still going to probably be attracted by the idea of the government helping people out with energy bills. It's just they might also be more receptive to the argument that this has got to be paid for at some point, and that conservative methods of doing it are going to be perhaps more effective than the plan that Labour proposed. But really, the pressure is probably going to come if we see polls change in terms of things like Starmer's approval rating or Labour's poll rating in terms of voting intention.
How is Starmer rating?
So Starmer he's generally been stuck in sort of the Ed Miliband zone, basically, where he's got net approval rating, which is more positive than the Prime Minister, so fewer people dislike him than dislike the Prime Minister, but equally only slightly more people actually like him. So with Ed Miliband, obviously that kind of crumbled as soon as a natural election campaign came along. With Keir Starmer, what's probably going to happen is that a new Prime Minister is going to come in and have a bit of a honeymoon period, and then there'll be a lot of pressure on him if Labour's overall poll lead isn't actually as big as they would expect it to be.
Okay, let's bring in Stephen Guy now, and we'll come back to Adam again shortly. Stephen's a GB News viewer and listener from Nottinghamshire, and he's 71 years of age. You're retired, as far as I know, Stephen. You worked for the Civil Service in the Crown Prosecution Service, and you are a Liz Truss supporter. Why would that be, Stephen?
Thank you, Eamonn. I think Liz is offering the clearest sense of direction, that she actually knows what she's going to do, and she's going to get on and do these things quickly. And I've got to say that when it comes to the cost of living crisis, it doesn't feel real. Is what I would say about it. We've had all sorts of warnings about you've mentioned a few already this morning, Eamonn. Warnings about all sorts of problems that the country is going to have, from shortage of HGV drivers, no food on supermarket shelves, containers at Felixstowe not being moved, and many of these things don't seem to have actually happened, certainly not to the extent that we were being led to believe that they would happen. So I'm not saying that it's scaremongering. I do understand that there are problems ahead, but economically speaking, we're being told that we're on the Titanic heading towards an iceberg. And I'm not convinced that we know how big that iceberg is going to be, and whether we're necessarily going to actually hit the iceberg.
Stephen, you're an interesting guy. You'd have hit the red wall, as it's termed, because in the past you've never been a member of any political party, but your allegiance has mostly been Labour in the past. Brexit changed that for you. Anything you've heard coming out of the Labour camp, particularly yesterday, dealing with the fuel crisis, that would edge you back towards the Labour Party?
I think that Keir Starmer is certainly an improvement over Jeremy Corbyn, but Jeremy Corbyn didn't set the bar particularly high. I think one of the problems that I would have with the Labour Party is actually Keir Starmer himself, because, as we know, he campaigned hard, vigorously, to have Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. And I think that's a big monkey on his back. Come the election, that's going to return. People are going to be talking to him about that, why he did that. How can he change so dramatically from where he was then to how he is now? But certainly, it's worth listening to what Keir Starmer's saying. I'm not totally convinced by all of it. I do believe that economically, the way forward is for us to grow the economy. So whichever politician I'm listening to at the moment, I want to hear more from them about growing the economy. That's a crucial part of the future.
Thank you for all of that. Very interesting man. We've got to leave it there because we've got some employment figures just being released.
Yes, the government has released the month's unemployment figures. Jack Kennedy, an economist for Indeed, joins us to analyse this month's numbers and to tell us what they mean for the job market. Thank you very much for joining us. So tell us, what's the latest?
Yeah, so it's interesting times for the labour market.
I'm a Labour supporter.
Could be a hung parliament.
Yeah, I think that's what it should be, to be honest. I think we need a bit of both.
But certainly the labour market remains incredibly tight at present. Unemployment remains very low at 3.8%. And we still have less than one unemployed job seeker per vacancy. So that's really being reflected in a lot of the staff shortages and hiring difficulties that we're continuing to see throughout the economy.
So we keep hearing this phrase, the Great Resignation. What is happening to the job market?
Yeah, so we've seen that historically really elevated levels of vacancies, near record levels, have been affording workers lots of opportunities to move between jobs. So we've seen really strong rates of job-to-job switching and a lot of industries that have really been bouncing back since the pandemic, since the reopening of the economy, have been ramping up hiring very, very strongly, and that's been affording workers lots of opportunities to move between jobs.
Are they paying more?
They are. We're seeing that particularly in the sectors that are struggling to hire the most. They've really having to be competing on pay and increasing salaries. So we've seen that in sectors like hospitality, manufacturing, construction, retail, warehousing. A lot of those lower paid sectors have really been having to increase pay. Our figures suggest annual wage increases between 7 and 10% to try and attract the workers that they need to fill those gaps.
Which is great news for those workers. For everybody else, does that mean inflation?
Ultimately, if companies really are going to have to eventually pass on some of these higher costs to consumers. So, yeah, we are starting to see that very much reflected in higher prices for consumers. We see that in the inflation figures. Inflation's already in excess of 9% and predicted to head even higher over the winter, particularly as energy prices soar even further in October and then in January. So really consumers' budgets certainly being squeezed.
Which are the industries that are really desperate for employees?
So our data suggests that the biggest shortages have been in sectors like hospitality, retail, loading and stocking, construction, manufacturing. We're seeing that really demand for workers has really rebounded very, very strongly in recent months. That's really exceeded the supply of workers available to come and fill those vacancies. We've seen a big increase in rates of economic inactivity. Since the pandemic, we've seen a lot of workers, particularly older workers, the over 50s, have been less active in the job market. A lot of people have taken early retirement. So we're facing almost 1 million missing workers from the UK labour market.
So basically, people, if I just get this, so people in their 50s are saying, thanks, had enough of this, bye-bye, which is very, very young to be able to do that. But also, they must be able to afford to do it.
Yeah, very much so. I think a lot of people sort of reassessed their life priorities during the pandemic, and a lot of older workers did opt to drop out of the labour market and perhaps rely on either savings or early drawdown of pensions. But clearly, we're in a cost of living crisis that's predicted to only get worse over the coming quarters. So one thing we're really keeping a close eye on is any signs of those cost of living pressures starting to draw more people back in from the sidelines of the labour market. So that rebalancing could be something that helps ease.
That's where we're going to get all our driving instructors that
potentially
there's a shortage of when they're over 50s.
I mean, some of the hiring strategies that companies are using are now doing things like taking out words like enthusiastic from their job ad because they want to appeal to people that they might tempt to unretire to come back into the workforce.
What a lot of rubbish.
No,
absolute rubbish. I mean, you know,
as
if you can't be enthusiastic if you're in your 50s.
Sorry, I do agree with that.
That's ageism.
But it is. But they're trying to write job adverts that would make someone think, yes, they actually would want to hire me if I'm in my 50s and I've already retired and I'm going to unretire, rather than writing a job advert that seems as though it's targeted to someone maybe in their 20s.
Very much so. We've seen employers really having to greatly sort of reassess traditional hiring practices, and part of that is really kind of using more inclusive language in job adverts, really kind of reassessing job design.
Putting older people on the job adverts.
Very much so. Yeah, well, certainly, yeah, trying to make jobs more appealing to them, and some of these people may need retraining if they've been in a particular industry for a long period of time. They may need some encouragement and support to help them transition into new sectors and learn new skills. So really all of that is something that employers are really being prompted by the incredibly tight labour market to reassess, to try and bring in the workers they need.
Jack Kennedy is an economist with, indeed, great name, incidentally.
Thank you.
Great name, great name. Adam, you've been on the wings there, listening to that from start to finish. Adam is a pollster with Opinion Research. Anything to add?
Mainly just that people are quite pessimistic about the economy and their own personal finances. So obviously, the way that confidence in the economy works, there's a risk there of that sort of feeding itself and becoming, spiralling and becoming a bit of a vicious circle. So you would hope and expect there is some kind of big announcement from the government in terms of support for people's household bills and energy bills in the near future to sort of arrest that.
OK. Guys, thank you both very much indeed. Appreciate it. Thank you. The time's 17 minutes past 7 o'clock.
Let's bring you up to date with the other stories today. And a British teenager has died whilst on holiday in Turkey. It's a 14-year-old who reportedly got into trouble swimming at the Liberty Lara Beach Hotel. He was pulled unconscious from the pool by a barman who attempted CPR before the boy was then taken to hospital.
The Ministry of Defence will stop controlling migrant operations in the English Channel early next year, GB News has learned. The Royal Navy took over command and control functions in April as part of a plan to deal with the growing number of small boats crossing the waters.
Heathrow Airport has announced it's going to extend that daily cap on passenger numbers until the end of the summer. The airport says that limit of 100,000 people departing a day will now apply until the end of October. Heathrow says the cap could be lifted earlier if it can improve on its current labour shortage.
You know, Jack, it's just very funny that our last story there again is about, airport chaos and all to do, Heathrow were saying, with a lack of staff, people just not taking up the jobs.
I know. I think we've all kind of probably experienced some of that pain.
But
lately.
basically, it's a reevaluation. I mean, workers are going away and saying, you just didn't pay us enough, you didn't appreciate us enough before, and you better change your tune on it.
That's it, yeah. So many switched into other sectors and just not going to come back. It's a real, it's a mess, to be honest.
And there's a credible irony to it. I just want to say, Heathrow will talk about what they can afford and whatever. All of these airports are owned by foreign companies as well, all Spanish companies, and they pick up money for nothing. You drop off someone at Heathrow Airport, 10 quid it costs you to do that. And, all in the name, it's for the environment. Is it? Like heck, for the environment. What a lot of nonsense. Don't you feel free? You can't comment. You can't comment. It's a lot of rubbish. You tell me any airport, whether you're in Glasgow, whether you're, around the country, where they will charge this nonsense that if you leave someone to the airport, we're going to charge you a £5 or a £10. Well, rubbish, because people aren't going to stop doing that. They're going to continue doing that, and the airports are just going to be raking in more money for old rope, which they should be paying to their employees. That's what they should be doing. Coming up to 7:20.
And lots of views this morning, so please do get in touch with yours, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Coming up, we're going to be going through all of the day's big sports stories. Paul Coit will be in the studio with us. That's after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. We saw some heavy showers yesterday. There'll be further showers and even some thunderstorms in places today, but they won't affect everyone. They'll be hit and miss. There'll be some drier weather around, although it will stay fairly humid in the south, whilst fresher weather is now arriving into the north and northwest. Now, low pressure is in charge, and two main areas to watch out for this morning. One area of rain affecting central and eastern Scotland. That tends to fizzle out during the day, but it's going to stay damp in places throughout the day. Showers also getting going quite early across southwest England, South Wales, and then more widely, these will develop across much of the rest of England and Wales. They'll be slow moving. There's a risk of hail and gusty winds, as well as some intense rain in a short space of time. Of course, that falling onto hard ground means that there's the risk of flash flooding. It's still humid in the south, mid-20s, whilst it's much fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A drying up process here, with brighter skies arriving by the afternoon for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and those clearer conditions spreading south overnight. So for Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, Mostly dry overnight with some clear spells and feeling cooler, 10 to 12 Celsius. Whilst it's still warm and humid across the rest of England as well as Wales, with further heavy showers continuing during the early hours of Wednesday, and a wet start particularly for the likes of the Midlands into central southern England, southwest England, South Wales. Further showers then get going across the southeast as well as East Anglia. Could be again some intense thunderstorms about, but once more they'll be hit and miss. However, a drier and brighter day is expected for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, and later on for parts of Wales and the southwest. The sun makes a reappearance here, but temperatures back to around average. So more typical UK weather emerging through the next few days after that thundery breakdown. I think it will stay changeable at the end of the week, but certainly a much cooler feel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Twenty-four minutes past 7. This is Breakfast with Eamonn and Rosie. Morning to Moriad, who's got in touch saying, my bill is £36 a month. All I have plugged in is an electric kettle, fridge, TV, water heater for half an hour twice a week, which gives me a lukewarm shower 4 times a week. These are the types of decisions that people are making because they realise, they look at their looming bills and think, I can't afford them. We are talking about how the candidates might be helping us with the cost of living on the programme.
Okay, also on this programme, 7:45 this morning, we're going to be taking a look at how that cost of living crisis is affecting childcare. Nurseries are closing, some of them without notice because of the financial pressures.
And after 9 o'clock, we're speaking to the man who's hunted down over 500 people who faked their own deaths, including, I'm sure you'll remember, the infamous canoe case, John Darwin.
Yeah, might be tempting to pretend you're dead, disappear.
What would tempt you?
Well, whatever it is, it's tempting Paul Coyte as well. He's laughing with me. You can join in any of our discussions. You can email us gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet us as well if you're alive at GB News. Let me run you through the back pages. We'll take a look at those, and we begin with the star, Darwin Nunez. He's in the back of a lot of newspapers. Nutter is the headline. The £85 million Liverpool signing. He missed 3 chances last night. Then he was sent off for head-butting. OK, so that happened to him. His manager not too happy with him. The Mail leads with the Chelsea and Spurs managers Thomas Tuchel and Antonio Conte being charged by the FA for their touchline bust-up. Bit of handbags going on there, but anyway, the FA doing what the FA do. And the Express says, save our season. Manchester United stars plead with the board for new signings to rescue the club. But of course, new signings, Paul, means bye-bye to a lot of them, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. See, the story is that now, I mean, this just every day there's something different about Manchester United, isn't there? I don't know how you feel about the whole situation.
Well, what I feel is,
tired of
what I feel is when they
it?
went 4-0 down after 25 minutes on Saturday, you're thinking, well, who's going to sign for them? Who will you actually attract?
Yeah.
This guy De Jong, as if he's sitting there making up his mind, he's not going to go there now, is he?
They want to go for money. They want to go to play in the Champions League. And yeah, of course, Manchester United are a huge club, but at the moment, if you're a player, you're going to think twice about going there. And this is the thing. It's all very well players going, well, we're going to get together and we're going to go and see the board and we're going to tell them you need to make more signings. It's like, try looking at yourself. You know, if you look at the way they were playing, there was nobody that stood out that looked like they were rolling their sleeves up and saying, come on, let's fight for this football club, let's do something about it. So many players. I've seen it so many times before. It's always, there's obviously going to be some that don't feel this way, but there's a lot that will always point at someone else and say, yeah, ain't me, Gov. You know, I'm doing everything. It's him. It's him. It's him. It's like, well, look at yourself. That's what they need to do collectively as a side and then move on. But you know, it's Liverpool. I mean, there was the worry that it's a Liverpool game next Monday, but now it probably looks a bit more attractive because Liverpool have only got 2 points now from 2 games after what happened last night.
It doesn't look that much more attractive.
I'm trying my best.
Yeah.
You know what? You never know what happens. It's the... And I know it almost sounds like I'm patronising here, but I swear I'm not. The situation where you've got local rivalries and you've got a big rivalry like Manchester United and Liverpool, you know, often all bets are off. I still think Liverpool are going to win, but there's always going to be a chance.
Does that affect Nunez, whether he'll play or not? Is he out of the next game?
Well, he's going to be out of the next game. He should be out of the next 3.
Oh, thank goodness for that.
But, well...
They've appealed it, have they? Or?
Well, I don't think they can't appeal. Because what happened is you've got Darwin Nunez, like you said just now, Uruguayan striker. He's a great player and he's come over there, but he was struggling. And he just couldn't score last night. And Joachim Andersen, who's the Crystal Palace defender, he was obviously getting in his head. And this is what happens in the Premier League. You know, this is what the game's all about. And it's a couple of little niggles here and there was a little something. Then anyway, Nunez turns round and headbutts him. Now, we've seen so much of the butting stags, you know, we just see their heads knocking together. But, I mean, he turned round and I don't think I've ever seen anything like that since... Zinedine Zidane in the World Cup when he did the one on the chest. I don't think I've ever seen anybody actually do it. So it was a straight red card. There was no question about it. Nobody could argue about it. Even Jurgen Klopp couldn't make an excuse about this one. Yeah. So he's saying, well, you know, I've told the boy he's a good boy and, you know, he can't do this. But, of course, he knows that. People say, oh, well, he'll get used to playing in the Premier League. You can't headbutt anybody.
Well, Liverpool still got a draw out of it, didn't they, as well? With
they
10 men.
They did, and then they scored again after that. But you'd think Crystal Palace only had 4 shots on target. I'm sure they'll be all right. But with Manchester City, who are stronger than they've ever been, already 2 wins, and we're only talking 2 games, they're 4 points behind, and it's still a lot at any point of the season.
It is, at any stage. Straight red cards as well to the managers of Chelsea and Spurs for Sunday.
I think the FA should get them in and say, well done. You've made the game very exciting. Everybody loved it. Let's just give you a little, clip around the ear hole and send them on their way. I don't know anybody that says what a disgusting performance it was by the 2 managers. It was just, like you said, a bit of handbags, a little bit of argy-bargy. There was nobody got hurt. There was nothing violent.
Bit of passion.
It was passion, and that's what it's all about, and that's what we're going to see in football, is passion.
Okay. Mightn't fit in the corporate image of the Premier League in 30 years and all that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Those celebrations, but I'm with you, and I do laugh when everybody does these campaigns, #BeKind and all that sort of thing. Yeah. There's the reality: 2 guys that hate each other on the touchline.
And during a game. I speak to old players that say, can't stand it when you see the tunnel and players who've got their arms around each other and everything. It's like afterwards, fine, but before and during the game, that's it. It's all about the competition, and also for the supporters as well. They love that, and I'm sure they'll speak afterwards. I'm sure everything's fine, but when the game's on...
I think speak afterwards in the bar or whatever it is, as long as we don't see it. I think all this hugging each other as they come off, you've just lost and you're hugging your opponents. I think, no.
Yeah, I agree.
No.
Because
maybe I'm just a bad loser.
I think all sports people are bad losers and top sports people. And when you see that and the rivalry, and it means so much, the game means so much to people, you'd rather, I agree with you. You know, you can do that way afterwards, but if they show that sign that, oh, look, we all love each other, how much do you truly care? How much do you truly care?
Well, our girl, Alice McCoglin, last night, she took silver at the European Championship.
Yeah, European Championships happening in Munich. It's been really busy for athletics. She got gold at the Commonwealth Games, didn't do so well in the World Championships before that. Last night, 10,000 metres, silver. I mean, it was a really good run, and she's a fantastic run. Her mum didn't manage that one at the European Championships. But I tell you what I thought was disappointing.
What?
Is in Munich, again, this is the famous old Olympic stadium where they had the 72 Olympics and World Cup in 74. It just looks so empty. And this is for athletics events. It seems that if they ever have them here, it will sell out. Everybody goes for it, and I've been banging the drum about this. We love sport in this country. But over there, it just seemed very quiet. And I don't know whether... someone texted me on the radio this morning just saying, look, it's a national holiday in Bavaria, whether that's got anything to do with it. But, you know, I want to see them full, and I think to go for a big championship like that, should be full stadiums.
I still think those Olympic Games in 1972 shouldn't have gone ahead.
Right.
After all that, the
with what happened,
assassinations, and the terrorism.
Which was in the middle. I mean, it started, didn't it? And then, absolutely, and then they continued it, which was a real mistake. But
well, in my humble opinion,
50 years ago now, though. 50 years.
50 years, incredible, absolutely incredible. Thanks very much, Paul.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. 33 minutes past 7. Stay with us. What's coming up?
We're going to be looking through the papers. Ali Mirage and Stephanie Tecci will be here talking us through this morning's stories.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 25 minutes to 8. Time to go through the papers now. And joining us again this morning is arts and culture broadcaster Stephanie Tecci and columnist at The Article, Ali Mirage. Really appreciate both of your time. Let's start with the front page of The Telegraph, if we can, Ali. They've got a story about border control and who's in charge.
That's right. Well, it says Royal Navy backs out of migrant patrols. And the story is basically saying that the Royal Navy have had enough about basically being effectively a taxi service for migrants coming across the Channel from France to the UK. Initially, a few months ago when this was announced by the government, it was meant to be that the Navy was going to be in control and was going to stop these crossings. But the crossings continue, and they continue at a pace. I mean, last year you had 30,000 people making that crossing. Remember, 27 people died in November trying to do it. And now you've got thousands more streaming across, paying up to £7,000 a head to people smugglers. Apparently, the rate's gone down. There's a bargain summer discount available that you can get over for about £2,000 while the weather is good. But the Navy have had enough. They know that there's a political vacuum.
I don't really understand that. How come the Navy have had enough? Does the Navy not follow orders from the government?
It does, but there is no government at the moment, Eamonn. I mean, the Prime Minister's moving out of Downing Street. I mean, that's also on the front page of the Telegraph, with the removal vans there showing he's moving to Chequers. So he's checked out. So there's no one really around until September the 5th. Look, if the new Prime Minister, whoever that is, says to the Navy, you've got to keep patrolling the waters, they'll have to do it. But the reality is it's not making any difference. The numbers are not going down in any way. Despite the 54 million that was given to the French, nothing's really happened. The numbers continue. So the only thing that was going to be tried was this Rwanda plan, which the government announced. But the government also needs to understand that there is a difference between announcing a policy and actually ensuring that it is enacted and people actually do get moved to Rwanda. So far, we haven't had a single person do that, and it's caught up in the courts.
But that's not the government's fault, is it?
Well, they should have thought about it. I mean, they should have... Look, before they announced it, they should have got their ducks in a row and thought, OK, there are going to be certain European justices that are going to challenge this in court. There's going to be judicial review. Let's change the law in the UK before we announce the policy, not ex post afterwards.
Now, in the Mail today, Stephanie, growing numbers of men are lonely because their relationship skills are not good enough to impress increasingly selective women. Are you one of those women?
Unfortunately, yes. Or maybe fortunately, actually. I wasn't really surprised by this article because, you know, a lot of single women have for a very long time, or the single women I know, it's always the same things that are coming up. You know, not finding men who are emotionally available or who know how to communicate or who are honest. And this psychologist, Dr. Greg Mathers, he said that competition is fierce. He said on dating apps, it's 2/3 of men on there with 1/3 of women, and most of them are not meeting the standards of high-valued women, and they're falling behind. And they're falling short on things such as emotionally availability, being honest and knowing how to court women the traditional way.
What do you mean, not being emotionally available? Does that mean being married?
No.
I'm sorry, I'd love to go out with you, but I'm not emotionally available. What does that mean?
Emotionally available means being able to communicate your feelings, what you're after in a relationship, and being able to give time to kind of connect with a woman. You know how women are. We're emotionally based creatures. And if a man can't communicate about his feelings or how he feels about you, you're kind of stuck in limbo. I feel like it really is a battle of sexes, but I do feel sorry for men these days because also they don't know how to navigate women because we're always pushing ahead and we are quite demanding as a sex.
Yeah, the thing I don't understand, and I'll take your word for it because you're there, you're out in the market, is that men who are not emotionally educated, emotionally in touch with their inner selves or their feminine side or whatever, but then you do see it and it's stark.
Yeah.
Because you realise that not everybody would be like me, for instance.
Are you emotionally open?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very in touch with my feminine side. I'm very appreciative of women.
But you had, did you have to learn that from a woman, or did it come to you naturally?
Well, all I know is this. When I came in here today, the first thing I said to Rosie was not what the lead news story was or whatever. I said, lovely orange dress. That's my favourite colour. And that's quite natural to me. But the amount of women that go, really? Really? My husband never says that to me. And I do find, I don't know what your view is, but sometimes men aren't very giving in terms of being appreciative.
Yeah.
Or it's just they're more guarded.
Yeah.
They don't wear their heart on the sleeve in the way that women do, where it's very easy to bond and it's very easy to know how someone's feeling. Sometimes you can think, have they have they quite got that? Do you understand how I'm feeling? I'm not sure, because they're not as attuned in communicating feelings.
And I think there's been this culture shift, because when I think of my dad's generation, it was like, you know, to be considered a man, it's like you wouldn't talk about your feelings and you would have to kind of hold it all in. But now it's like almost we want, with everyone so open about their feelings online, you almost want men to communicate more and how they're feeling. And obviously this is leaving them lonely.
And you've had experience of this, have you?
Yeah, loads of times. But again, I feel
Is it
like...
not called just being dull or boring?
It could be that, but I think as well, when you meet a lot of people have had trauma from childhood. So now they're actually trying to, you know, meet someone and create a family with them. All those traumas come up.
Well, this is fascinating. I never, ever appreciated this before.
Yeah.
And I'll just give you an example. Last Saturday, I was at dinner and there were 3 women around the table. And they all sat and talked. 3 very educated, lovely-looking women, whatever. And they all sat and talked about things that were said to them when they were children and how they've carried that throughout their lives. And I think often that men might be more robust about that. If someone says something about you, just say, go through one, you know, whatever. You're not, you know, you throw it off. But women will take that from their parents or from their siblings or from ex-boyfriends or whatever, and they keep it with them throughout the rest of their life. You know, it's like women saying, you know, does my bum look big in this? Why do you say that? Because, well, I had a boyfriend once who said to me, you know?
And that's why the single game at the moment is very scary, because you're meeting a lot of people who are just wounded and who don't know how to interact with each other. It's almost like dating is no longer fun. And this is why the numbers of people who are lonely is going up.
That's sad, isn't it?
Well,
Dating is no longer fun.
Indeed, but it also says in the article here that the men's key problem is skills deficits. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, maybe I need some skills training. I'm not sure. But I also think this prevalence of apps, I do understand that we're all extremely busy and it's an easy way of like trying to meet people. But the amount of articles I read, a lot of them actually from women saying that this is not really good for mental health. And in my own experience, it's like this constant swipe right culture that you're always waiting, and it's more about joy seeking than actually finding something meaningful. It's very hard to do that. I mean, occasionally it does work, and the stories you hear where people do find their partners, that's great. But the problem is at the moment we've got a plethora of choice, and we're constantly trying to find the next thing that's better than the last thing, constantly looking for the next hit. And I'm not sure it's doing us any good.
There is a difference as well, and I've always been susceptible to this, and that is falling in love. Yes. And I think once you fall in love,
what happens next?
Yeah, you're right in there. So you're not sort of waiting for the next best thing or something.
Well, there's a certain element of vulnerability as well. If you're falling in love, you are opening yourself up, right? And that's a risk you're taking.
I always feel like we should be taught how to build healthy relationships. That's one thing we don't get taught about in schools, and you know, depending what you saw at home as well, it kind of warps your senses in that sense when it comes to relationships.
Very good point. We could talk about that all day, but we can't because we've got other things to talk about.
There is a new type of vaccine that the government announced yesterday. It's on the front page of The Guardian. Ali, you've got the details. What is different about this is it will tackle 2 strains of COVID.
That's right. So the original COVID strain that we had, and now the Omicron variant, the BA1 or whatever variant it is, this is actually interesting. So it's double hatting this new vaccine, and it's going to be rolled out from next month. It's going to be available to all over 50s, also vulnerable people, and they should go and get it. Health Secretary Steve Barclay is saying at the moment that it's important for people to avail themselves of this and to prepare yourselves as best you can ahead of a winter. We don't want a resurgence of COVID happening. So it's good that they've done this. It's been done by Moderna, and it just shows again that the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation has been the first one in the world to again approve this new kind of jab, and people should go and get it.
Well, so you say, but there's all those anti-vaxxers that would...
Indeed.
This is like a stake through a vampire's heart.
It is, indeed. Well, anti-vaxxers and a lot of lockdown skeptics. I mean, last time I was on here, Eamonn, on another show, which shall remain nameless, I was rounded on by 3 women, all perfectly attired, who were saying that because I was not a lockdown skeptic, that I was like beyond the pale, you know. But yeah, look, it's an open society. Everyone's got different views. Some of these issues are quite emotive. But look, personally, I've had
You'd
jabs,
be happy to take it?
And I'd take it, yeah.
Right, OK.
We talked earlier, there was a message in from a lady who is taking quite extreme measures to make sure that her energy bill is not unaffordable. I know you've got some more stories in the Mirror.
Yeah, so this really gripped my heart this morning because we keep on hearing about the cost of living crisis, but when you actually hear those personal cases, you just realise how big of a crisis this is. So on the front page of the Mirror today, it's Tammy Prescott, who has got terminal stomach cancer, and she says, you know, she should be spending her final days with her children, creating memories, and she says she can't do that because there's a choice of either taking her child out or putting the heating on to help making sure her bones feel warm. So, you know, reading this kind of stuff, it's just heartbreaking to hear and it's heartbreaking to see, and it just makes me realise there's going to be more Tammys and there's going to be more different people who are going to be experiencing this winter.
It's a sad reality. Right, civil service, right. Sunak vows to cut bloated civil service. I've been trying to get an appointment with the civil service, a certain department of civil service, for 3 months now. There's nobody there. There's nobody that can give you a meeting, for instance. So the department will remain nameless at this stage, but just nobody there.
Probably we're all working from home. I mean, this is one of the things.
Or on holiday.
Indeed. Jacob Rees-Mogg, as you know, has been sort of going around saying, you know, get back to your desk. There have been some serious issues with the civil service. I mean, the civil service is meant to be the Rolls-Royce service in the world. And what you saw when troops were removed from Afghanistan was that, you know, a lot of the senior civil servants, permanent secretaries at various departments were all on holiday. You would have thought that they could use an Outlook calendar planner, right? But clearly not. So there have been issues in the civil service. What the newspaper is reporting is that Rishi Sunak is saying he will pledge to cut the bloated civil service in a Whitehall shake-up. There's over 90,000 jobs that could potentially go through retirements or voluntary redundancies. But he also wants to bring in performance-related pay. So you don't just get paid based on longevity, but you also get paid on performance, which doesn't seem exactly revelatory to me. No. And also he says that if you want to rise up the ranks of the civil service to the top level, then you should spend at least some time outside the civil service in the real world to improve your skill set and give you a different perspective. So I think some of this stuff, it sounds very sensible. The unfortunate thing is for Rishi Sunak at the moment, he may not get to implement it unless he can do better in the polls with the Tory members.
What do you think morale is like in the civil service
Very
right now?
poor at the moment, Rosie. Very, very poor right now. I think it's...
And they're reading stories like this.
They're reading stories like this. I think, look, the civil service has got some absolutely fantastic quality people in it. You don't need to have a fallout with your civil servants, particularly with the FDA union now. There's also issues around pay, and you've got issues across the public sector, right? So you don't need a big Barney with your civil servants. However, I do think that to say that there's no element for reform within the civil service, and also Sunak's talking about bringing back the Fast Stream programme, which was really the elite programme that got some of the best and brightest graduates into the civil service. I think that that's something that should be, again, revisited and looked at. I think civil service is a great institution. We need a Rolls-Royce level, and I think he wants to try and, you know, make sure that we get that with some reform.
Well, we're going to be revisiting and looking at you two again in 40 minutes' time. But for the moment, Ali and Stephanie, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, 10 to 8, and parents across England are being left without childcare as financial pressures and staff shortages cause nurseries to close.
Pregnant, then Screwed, that's the title, is a charity and campaign group that tackles discrimination against mothers, and it's been flooded with messages from parents who have been stuck after their nursery has shut.
Well, the founder, Joelle Braley, joins us now. Thank you very much. I know you've been speaking to countless parents. Just explain to us what's happening. Some of them are literally turning up to drop off their children and then realise the nursery's closed. That just seems unthinkable.
Yeah, we're having a mix of responses. We're getting, as you say, women turning up to drop their children off at nursery and them saying it's closed. We're hearing from parents saying they're getting letters to say the nursery is going to have to close in the next few months. Some people are saying that their nursery is having to go part-time or term time only because of staffing issues and because they just can't afford to operate full-time anymore. And of course, this is a massive issue if you've got a job. Your child needs looking after. And so it means that for many parents, and particularly mothers, they are having to leave their jobs as a result. And for many more, they're having to go part-time and therefore reducing their income during a cost of living crisis.
Me what people's options are. Let's say you're expecting and you're planning your maternity leave, and then when you want to go back to work, what are the best things you can do for you, for your career and for your child?
Well, the best thing that you can do for your career is to go back full time. It's to go back full time and to have childcare, suitable childcare that's really high quality for your child full time. But that's just not the reality, particularly for mothers. Firstly, because it's very hard to get part-time work. There are only 10% of jobs that are advertised as part-time, and most of them are low quality and low pay. But also because childcare is extremely expensive. We have the second most expensive childcare system in the world. For 2/3 of families, they pay the same or more for their childcare as they do their rent or their mortgage. So this is their biggest expenditure, and it means that many, particularly women, are paying to go to work. And of course, that doesn't really make sense. So they do try to go back part-time in order to reduce their reliance on childcare and in order to manage their professional obligations and their personal obligations. But that then sets women off on what is affectionately termed as the mummy track, where they're in low-paid part-time work with, and it's very unlikely that they're going to progress, they're going to be promoted. So we don't have the structures and systems in place to facilitate women having children and a career, and that's what we term the motherhood penalty. And it means that by the time a woman's first child is 12 years old, her hourly pay rate is 33% behind a man's.
Parents are coming up with really creative solutions. They're being forced to do it, whether it's taking some of your friends' children to look after for the day and then swapping. What kind of things, what kind of measures are people taking to be able to better manage this?
I mean, that's exactly what they're doing. They're having to, strike relationships with other families. If you have parents close by or siblings close by, then hopefully you can find ways that they can help out. But that just isn't the reality for many families. If you're in a couple, then some people are trying to strike deals with their employer where they perhaps work later at night so that their partner can manage the night times. There's all sorts of chaotic, often, and really stressful planning going on behind the scenes that, again, affects your mental and physical health. These things aren't easy to manage, but they're your only option. The reason why people are getting in touch with us often is because they have nowhere else to go, but also because we can help them make a flexible working request, and we can tell them about the legalities of that flexible working request. So it means it's more likely that they will be successful in their request. But it really is a massive, massive struggle, and it really is forcing many women in particular out of their careers right in the middle of a cost of living crisis. The government really needs to get a grip of this, because we've been forewarning this would happen for years, and we're seeing the results of that right now with 4,000 childcare providers net closing between March 2021 and March 2022. It's a serious issue that needs prioritising.
One of the topics that came up in the last couple of weeks was the idea of changing the ratio of the number of people that one person could look after. Is that something that you think might work? Are there any other solutions that you think maybe the government could impose which would take some of the pressure off parents and nurseries?
No, that won't work. And it's just the government kicking the can down the road again. They know that this is a serious issue, so they're sort of fiddling with the problem. We know that won't change the cost for parents. And we know that nurseries don't want it. We know that parents don't want it. All that will do is reduce the quality of the childcare we have on offer. And when we've just come out of COVID, and we know children are desperately in need of more support, more mental health support, better education. This is just the worst time to do that. We also, part of the reason why nurseries are closing is they can't recruit staff because they're so overworked, so underpaid, so undervalued that nobody wants to do the job. And if you're going to make the job harder for them by giving them more kids to look after, you're only going to make that recruitment issue even worse. So what the government really needs to do is follow the lead of other countries. Canada, Switzerland, Japan, Australia have all recently invested billions in their childcare sector because they realise it's good for the economy.
Yeah.
They know that investing in childcare yields more pound for pound in value, as it reduces welfare costs, it increases jobs. It does has so many benefits for the economy. Canada found that for every dollar it invested in childcare, it got between $1.80 and $2.50 back into the wider economy. We need investment. We've needed it for years, and that's the only way to solve the issue.
Well, thank you very much for laying out the case here this morning. Joelle Braley, campaigner and founder of Pregnant Then Screwed. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Please do get in touch. Quite extraordinary that parents are turning up at nursery with their child to drop them off for the day to find out the nursery shut its doors. If you've ever been in a situation like that, or if you've adopted any sort of very creative ideas to handle childcare, please do get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. After the break, we're going to be speaking to a housing campaigner as rental evictions are rising 39% up in just 3 months. All of that to come after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. We saw some heavy showers yesterday. There'll be further showers and even some thunderstorms in places today, but they won't affect everyone. They'll be hit and miss. There'll be some drier weather around, although it will stay fairly humid in the south, whilst fresher weather is now arriving into the north and northwest. Now, low pressure is in charge, and two main areas to watch out for this morning. One area of rain affecting central and eastern Scotland. That tends to fizzle out during the day, but well, it's going to stay damp in places throughout the day. Showers also getting going quite early across southwest England, South Wales, and then more widely these will develop across much of the rest of England and Wales. They'll be slow moving. There's a risk of hail and gusty winds, as well as some intense rain in a short space of time. Of course, that falling onto hard ground means that there's the risk of flash flooding. It's still humid in the south, mid-20s, whilst it's much fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A drying up process here, with brighter skies arriving by the afternoon for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and those clearer conditions spreading south overnight. So for Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, mostly dry overnight with some clear spells and feeling cooler, 10 to 12 Celsius. Whilst it's still warm and humid across the rest of England as well as Wales, with further heavy showers continuing during the early hours of Wednesday, and a wet start particularly for the likes of the Midlands into central southern England, southwest England, South Wales. Further showers then get going across the southeast as well as East Anglia. Could be again some intense thunderstorms about, but once more they'll be hit and miss. However, a drier and brighter day is expected for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, and later on for parts of Wales and the southwest. The sun makes a reappearance here, but temperatures back to around average. So more typical UK weather emerging through the next few days after that thundery breakdown. I think it will stay changeable at the end of the week, but certainly a much cooler feel.
Tonight on GB News, at 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Sunak and Truss are urged to step up plans to deal with the worsening cost of living emergency.
A very good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 16th of August. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Rosie Wright.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will face off tonight at another leadership hustings, this time in Perth in Scotland, where they will be pressured to be more ambitious when it comes to their plans to tackle the cost of living.
We're going to be live in Manchester for the latest on the Ryan Giggs court trial. The former footballer is facing charges of assault and of coercive and controlling behaviour.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex reportedly have no plans to see William and Kate when they fly to the UK next month. Harry and Meghan are returning to the country for a series of charity events.
Now, please do get in touch. You can join any of our discussions. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can drop us a tweet too, @gbnews.
And you've been doing that, and we were talking earlier about there is a shortage amongst so many things of driving instructors as well. Good morning, Pat. I'm a driving instructor, and I have been told they're being bought up by an app and sold on for profit. I have many waiting to get a test, which has led me to semi-retire and eventually stop teaching altogether. We were talking about these apps and things that people who traditionally teach driving, it's just a different ball game now as well.
I mean, morning to Julie, who says, in Bristol, you can only book a test now in January 2023.
Get out of it.
The cancellations are very few and far between.
Get out of it. But you could go somewhere else, couldn't you, maybe, to get your test? But that's pretty awful. If you're ready, raring to go, and you have to wait until next year before you can actually get a chance to maybe fail. Who knows? Pressure is increasing on the two candidates looking to become the next Prime Minister to come up with more ambitious plans to tackle the cost of living.
Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak are going to face off again tonight at a hustings, this time in Perth in Scotland, in the wake of Labour announcing plans for a freeze on energy bills and a windfall tax.
Now, all this as data reveals bailiff evictions for missed rental payments have risen by nearly 40% over 3 months.
Well, let's find out more. Joining us in the studio is Kwejo Teneboa, social housing activist. Really appreciate your time. How bad is it? The amount in the last 3 months that evictions have soared is quite stunning.
It absolutely is. I mean, 39% over the last 3 months. Do I think that's the worst it's going to get? Absolutely not. I think the cost of living crisis is only bitten when it's come to housing, and it's only going to get worse. I mean, last time I was talking about the state of social housing. Now I'm here talking about how bad the private rented sector is getting, and it's only going to get worse. I mean, we're seeing evictions going up. We're seeing non-fault evictions going up. We're seeing people not being able to afford or feed themselves, never mind afford their rent, and they're losing the roof over their heads. Yeah. And what's ultimately going to happen is when people can't afford to rent privately, they're going to fall onto a social sector, which last time I was on, I explained, is already stretched as it is. I mean, demand just doesn't meet supply when it comes to social housing, and we've got 1 million people on the waiting list as it is.
As it is. What's the relationship, Kwejo, would you say, between tenant and landlord these days? I'm only speaking anecdotally, whether it's the private market or the public market. And I tell you, they seem to hate each other. There's a lot of mistrust.
Absolutely, and I think it's only getting worse. And listen, I know I'm a housing campaigner, and I'm not going to say all landlords are the same, because that would be wrong for me to say. But what we are seeing is just how bad things are, and there definitely is a power imbalance. When we see regulation, when we see the rights of tenants, there's a massive power imbalance, and it favours landlords, unfortunately.
What do they bring to the party? I mean, they will say, you know, if it wasn't for us, there'd be more people who are homeless and whatever. But I'll tell you what, if you are a landlord and you are looking for tenants in the months and years ahead, you're going to have to maybe have more understanding than has been demonstrated to date.
I mean, absolutely, because like I mentioned earlier, evictions are going up and people are being made homeless. I mean, it's record levels. And when we talk about landlords and tenants, I'll give you an example. Last few days, I found out from someone, they went to view a privately rented property, and I think it was around 2,250 was the asking price by the landlord. 29.
Wait a minute, but this is per month.
Yeah, per month.
Right, per
month.
Yeah.
And the landlord.
There it is there on screen. There's the.
Yeah, I mean, 29 other tenants went to view the property. What the landlord then said is, because so many have come, now you all need to bid against each other, and it's the highest bidder that will take the property and pay that amount every month. During a cost of living crisis, that's completely unacceptable. We're now exploiting, or there's landlords out there, not all of them, exploiting the situation where people are suffering and vulnerable to fatten their own pockets. And it is selfishness and greed, unfortunately. And I know that's the way the world works, but it's not right.
The reality is, we were talking about the bailiffs arriving and evictions up 40%. You've probably seen this firsthand. I've never had to witness this.
Yeah.
That must be a sorry sight.
It is. I mean, and I go into tenants' homes on a daily basis and speak to tenants on a daily basis. And I mean, it's becoming a point now where tenants are having to borrow off of their kids to pay for food, because they just can't afford their bills, they can't afford their rent and everything else on top of that. They're having to turn to their own children in order to get some sort of money just to feed themselves. And with this going on in housing, and I mean, we've heard nothing, barely anything from the potential future prime ministers on this. They don't get the situation with housing. And I don't know whether it's a thing where they don't understand it, because you don't need to be a rocket scientist to get the basics of how housing's working in the crisis at the moment. But they just don't seem to care about the elephant in the room. And that's the situation we're seeing now when people living in disrepair.
Okay, but you tell me what politician does get it.
That's a good question.
Because over the years I haven't seen whatever they say, whatever they do. Then you get, the present Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying, "Yes, well, here's a good election ploy. Let's sell off remaining stock of social housing." What an awful thing to be offering at this time.
Absolutely, and I mean, they're still going to push that idea, even when we can see people cannot even afford their rent, never mind trying to get on a broken property ladder as it is. It's just a promise that won't be delivered. And listen, I don't work in housing, I don't work in government, but I can tell you that for free. As a campaigner, I'm doing this work and seeing the extent to how bad things are when it comes to housing over the last year. What they're promising cannot be delivered, and they need to address the elephant in the room, because otherwise this is going to get worse. And it's whether they're going to address it now or wait for the system to completely collapse, because it will collapse.
I often go out reporting for GB News, and I spent quite a lot of time over the last few weeks with debt charities and speaking to people who are getting advice from them, and they come in with sometimes plastic bags full of letters that they are just so overwhelmed they can't even open the post anymore, because it's become such a mental battle and is so stressful. There's a lot of misinformation. People don't realise, for example, if they don't pay their council tax, they can be sent to prison. So what if I'm watching or listening this morning and I am in real financial stress, where I'm looking at my incomings and outgoings and looking towards October and thinking, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills, let alone my rent. What are the things those people should be doing?
Oh, I mean, it's going to be in their millions. There's going to be loads of people out there worrying about them. There are charities out there like Shelter, for example, that are trying to help, but ultimately it comes back to funding from the government. Unless it's there in the support, they cannot get it. Why are they not unfreezing housing benefit, for example, when tenants are going to need it, especially the most vulnerable that just cannot afford the private rental prices, or even in social housing, we're going to see that the rental prices are going to go up, and tenants just can't afford it. Ultimately, it comes back to the people in power. But I mean, for MPs, for example, 18% are landlords. 24% of Conservative MPs are landlords. It's definitely a conflict of interest, and unfortunately, they're not trying to address that issue now. And unless they do, there isn't a solution that we can rely on for tenants in those sorts of situations. It needs to come from the government. They need to address it, and they need to take housing seriously, because it will just get worse.
Quajo, I really don't know what to say to you. You make an impassioned and sensible case, of course, and it's something social housing should be a priority. But it doesn't seem to be. I don't know what the answer is, but thank you very much indeed for raising the questions.
Thank you.
Kwejo Twenaboa, he's a social housing activist. Thank you.
Thank you.
So at 8:10, we now can tell you it's day 2 of the second week of the Ryan Giggs trial in Manchester.
The former footballer has been charged with assault and with coercive and controlling behaviour. He denies all of those charges.
We go now to our Northwest of England correspondent, Sophie Reaper, who's there at Manchester Crown Court for us. And she's going to tell us what's been happening and what is likely to happen today. Sophie, good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning to you both. As you say, we're into the 7th day of the Ryan Giggs trial here at Manchester Crown Court. Now, the court isn't actually due to start till about 10:30 this morning. Let me just give you a little bit of update on what we heard yesterday. We heard from several different witnesses for the prosecution, including Kate Greville's sister Emma, who was also allegedly assaulted by Mr Giggs back on the 1st of November in 2020. She described the night of the incident to the court, and she said that she was at the property looking after the couple's dog whilst they went on a night out in Manchester. She told the court that her sister had been planning to leave Mr Giggs for quite some time. They even had a flat ready for her to move into. But it was that night that she received a message from her sister saying to pack up her belongings and get ready to go. Kate then returned home, shortly followed by Mr Giggs, and Emma explained to the court how it was then that a scuffle broke out, and it was this that led to the alleged assault on her. She described how Mr Giggs' elbow touched her jaw in a get-off-me manner. Later that night, she explained to the court, a further argument broke out between Kate and Ryan, and it was this that led to the alleged assault on her sister. Emma said that Mr Giggs placed his hands on her sister's shoulders and then proceeded to headbutt her in the lip. Now, we're not too sure what's expected to happen today, although we are expected to hear from several different witnesses who will be questioned by both the prosecution and by the defence. As I say, we're into the 7th day of an expected 10 here, but whether or not we actually see a sentence on that 10th day will depend on whether or not we stick to the schedule here at Manchester Crown Court.
Sophie, thank you very much indeed. With the time at 8:13, let's bring you up to date with what's happening news-wise. The Ministry of Defence will stop controlling migrant operations in the English Channel early next year, GB News has learned. The Royal Navy took over command and control functions in April as part of a plan to deal with a growing number of small boats crossing the waters.
The Royal College of Midwives is calling for more funding for maternity services as the number of midwives in England has dropped over the past year. The birth rate in England, though, rose by more than 10,000 between 2020 and 21, according to the ONS, but NHS figures show the number of midwives has fallen by around 600.
Heathrow Airport has announced it will extend its cap on passenger numbers until the end of summer. The airport says a daily limit of 100,000 departing travellers will now apply until October the 29th. Heathrow says that cap could be lifted earlier if it can improve its current labour shortage.
Now, Prince Harry and Meghan have announced they're going to visit the UK next month for charity events. This is the first time they've ever visited England since the Platinum Jubilee celebrations in early June.
Well, let's go to our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, who joins us in the studio today to tell us why we are all due the honour of this trip.
Well, we're all due the honour, Eamonn, because of what a source close to the Sussexes has described as visiting several charities close to their hearts. But I think what's perhaps more interesting is the timing of this visit. The first charity event is a place called One Young World, and Meghan is expected to deliver a keynote speech, which is happening the day the new Tory leader is announced. And then, of course, the day after, the new Tory leader will go to Her Majesty the Queen, who is expected to travel down from Balmoral to London to appoint her new Prime Minister. And then the day after that, the Queen's expected to hold a Privy Council meeting. So constitutionally, it's a very busy time for the royal family. And then, of course, we've got this issue of Prince Harry's security. We know that he's suing the Home Office over a decision to remove his taxpayer-funded police protection in 2020. He's also suing the Home Office and the Metropolitan Police over a Home Office committee's decision to not allow him to pay for his own police protection when he's in the UK. And last month he actually won a bid to bring High Court action against the Home Office. And all of this is happening again at the time where we're expecting Prince Harry's new tell-all autobiography to be published. We're expecting perhaps October. One of the papers is speculating October, but certainly I would say in the autumn, which is going to ruffle a few feathers of the royal family, because if the Oprah Winfrey interview is anything to go by, where there is accusations of racism and a lack of help for Meghan's alleged mental health struggles, it's going to be controversial, to say the least.
There's been a lot of raised eyebrows about this trip, and you sort of hinted at it there with the timing. Is that fair?
Is it fair? Very good question. I think the plans would have been in place way before any kind of Tory leadership timetable would have been announced. So I think it's unfair to say that it's all a conspiracy. There were people on Twitter speculating that they decided to announce that they were planning this trip to Europe and the UK to coincide with Princess Anne's birthday to try and upstage Princess Anne, of course, the hardest working royal if you go by the number of engagements she carries out every year. But I think it's perhaps unfair to say that it's purely down to trying to upstage the royal family or upstage the Tory leadership election.
So if we take it on its face value, they're coming here to visit some charities.
Yep.
What's on their agenda?
So they're going to be visiting the One Young World charity in Manchester. Meghan has been a counsellor for the charity since 2014. She's expected to deliver a keynote speech. They're also going to be going to Germany for the Invictus Düsseldorf 1 year to go. Of course, Prince Harry founded the Invictus Games for wounded veterans to take part in sporting events for their reconciliation, and then they're also going to be going to the Well Child Awards, which we believe will be held somewhere in the UK, which Prince Harry is patron of. So a number of charities that they are involved with.
And one of the questions that has come in from a GB News viewer and listener this morning is saying, isn't this just all about their documentary? Will they be doing filming while they're here?
I would be very surprised if the Netflix crew was not trailing them. A Netflix deal reportedly worth around £80 million to have kind of exclusive rights, up-close and personal rights to everything the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have been doing over the last year. Prince Harry's argument is that that is to pay for his own police protection. There's also talk of perhaps they will visit the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, or indeed Her Majesty the Queen, because they'll all be staying in Windsor at the time that week, because the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are moving out of Kensington Palace to Adelaide Cottage, which is just 800 metres from Frogmore Cottage, which is the official residence of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in the UK. So a lot of unanswered questions this morning.
Well, Cameron, you've given us a little bit of clarity. Thank you very much, Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent. Right now, it's coming up to 20 minutes past 8. You're with Breakfast.
After the break, we want to talk about the war in Ukraine. Are you seeing less of it on your television sets? We're going to be talking to the former head of the British Army about this and the consequences of that, if that actually is the case.
All of that after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Ada McGivern from the Met Office. We saw some heavy showers yesterday. There'll be further showers and even some thunderstorms in places today, but they won't affect everyone. They'll be hit and miss. There'll be some drier weather around, although it will stay fairly humid in the south, whilst fresher weather is now arriving into the north and northwest. Now, low pressure is in charge, and two main areas to watch out for this morning. One area of rain affecting central and eastern Scotland. That tends to fizzle out during the day, but well, it's going to stay damp in places throughout the day. Showers also getting going quite early across southwest England, South Wales, and then more widely, these will develop across much of the rest of England and Wales. They'll be slow moving. There's a risk of hail and gusty winds, as well as some intense rain in a short space of time. Of course, that falling onto hard ground means that there's the risk of flash flooding. It's still humid in the south, mid-20s, whilst it's much fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A drying up process here, with brighter skies arriving by the afternoon for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and those clearer conditions spreading south overnight. So for Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, mostly dry overnight with some clear spells and feeling cooler, 10 to 12 Celsius. whilst it's still warm and humid across the rest of England as well as Wales, with further heavy showers continuing during the early hours of Wednesday. And a wet start, particularly for the likes of the Midlands into central southern England, southwest England, South Wales. Further showers then get going across the southeast as well as East Anglia. Could be, again, some intense thunderstorms about, but once more they'll be hit and miss. However, a drier and brighter day is expected for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, and later on for parts of Wales and the southwest. The sun makes a reappearance here, but temperatures back to around average. So more typical UK weather emerging through the next few days after that thundery breakdown. I think it will stay changeable at the end of the week, but certainly a much cooler feel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Just looking ahead to 8:45 this morning, we're going to be talking to a backer of Rishi Sunak about what support the former Chancellor would give to you come this winter if he became Prime Minister.
And just after 9, we're speaking to the insurance investigator who tracks down people who fake their own deaths. He's found over 500 people across 83 countries.
So it's a thing. The thing, people like to do that, like to say, I mean, what must it take that you get to a stage where you think, I just want to be invisible?
It must be, at times, I'm sure, an utterly desperate situation to take that extraordinary course of action.
Yeah.
And then to be found out.
Yeah, by an investigator who's going to tell us his secrets if you're thinking of doing it. You can join in any of our discussions. It could have its benefits. You can email us, gbviews@gbnews, and that you can tweet as well at gbnews. Now, it's almost 6 months since Russia invaded Ukraine, and international media attention after that, was intense at the time, but has it waned?
Conservative peer and former party leader Lord William Hague has now warned of the dangers of forgetting about the war, saying that's a threat to everybody's security and economic prosperity.
So what does he mean by that? Well, the former head of the British Army, we're delighted to welcome and say good morning to General Lord Richard Dannett, joins us now to discuss that. General Dannett, good morning to you.
Eamonn, good morning.
Have you noticed a lack or a lessening of coverage?
Well, I think the answer to that has to be yes. in a sense, it's understandable, but it's definitely not welcome and not right. Yes, of course, the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, is very much capturing a lot of headlines at the present moment, as is, of course, the protracted Conservative leadership race, that election very much dominating the headlines as well. And in the last few days, again, quite properly, a lot of coverage of the first anniversary of the Taliban taking over in Afghanistan. But Lord Hague is absolutely right to point out the fact that what is going on in Ukraine doesn't just affect Ukraine, it affects all of us in the West. And it's really important that we keep that particular story front and center of our media coverage, front and center of our own thinking. And particularly, our government and other Western governments keep support for Ukraine front and center to make sure that Ukraine is defended in the best possible manner, that future Russian aggression is deterred. Because otherwise, again, as Lord Hague says, our security in the West is threatened and our prosperity is threatened. Just link the issue back to the cost of living crisis, to the soaring cost of energy. Ukraine and the war in Ukraine has got a lot of responsibility for this. So your basic point is right, Eamonn. We must keep Ukraine very much high in the news round and very much in the forefront of government thinking and our own thinking.
I mean, let's make sure we're not guilty of doing exactly that. Can you give us sort of an overview, if possible, of where you think Ukraine is currently standing in its attempt of defence?
Well, where we are at the present moment is Ukraine is now benefiting considerably from the Western supply of arms and ammunition and critically training. A large number of Ukrainian troops are being trained in this country, in the United Kingdom at the present moment. And we've seen the success of the long-range rocket systems. You're showing pictures of just those systems now. And what this has meant is that the Ukrainians' military capability has increased considerably. They're able to contain Russian advances in the Donbass area, in Donetsk and Luhansk provinces. And I think it's fair to say that there's something of an operational pause going on at the present moment. The Ukrainians are consolidating their additional strength. They're preparing for a significant counteroffensive, which will be a slow burn counteroffensive in the Kherson area in the south of the country. And concerned about that, the Russians have been moving a number of troops from elsewhere in Donbass to counter that Russian counteroffensive, that Ukrainian counteroffensive. So these moves are preliminary at the present moment. They will come to a much more explosive head at some point in the not too distant future. So I suppose it's not surprising that as there's a lack of major action at the present moment, the story of Ukraine has slipped down the news agenda. But believe me, it will go back up there again. And what's increasingly important, and of course I should say that the issues around the nuclear plant at Zaporizhzhia are extremely worrying and are extremely important. But over time, there will have to be a return to negotiation between Ukraine and Russia, mediated by a third party, because I think the reality, which everyone's going to have to come to accept, is that Russia will not win as far as Ukraine is concerned. Russia will not be able to capture the whole of Ukraine, but Ukraine will probably never be strong enough to throw the Russians completely out of Donbass and the Crimea. So the new normal in Ukraine is probably going to be that some 15 to 20% of their country is permanently occupied by the Russians. And that's going to have to be the basis of negotiations in the future. So this story, which has been very violent over the last 6 months, has got more violence to come, I'm afraid. But actually, it's going to be a long story. And ultimately, it'll end in negotiations, which will satisfy no party. But at the end of the day, some form of peace has got to be restored to Ukraine so that the majority of that country can be rebuilt and Ukraine can have a meaningful, purposeful future.
And meanwhile, the atrocities continue, and it's very, very important, as the General Lord Richard Dannett says there, that we are kept informed in this because our cost of living crisis, a lot of what we're going through at the moment, is directly connected to the Russian invasion of Ukraine there as well. General, the Ukrainian army, it's always a mystery to me. I know very little about it, and I'm used to, previous conflicts, whether it's Vietnam, whether it was Iraq, that we're up close and personal and we see these forces and we understand their capabilities. We just saw a brief glimpse of footage there of the Ukrainian army. But just how strong is it? How capable is it? And basically, is it being shored up by American and British forces and manpower?
Well, you ask a very good question there. I mean, going back 20 years, the Ukrainian army was a splinter, if you like, of the army of the Soviet Union, the successors to the Red Army of Second World War fame. In the early years of independence, frankly, the Ukrainian army was pretty poor. When I was the army chief, I had talks with their army chief in Kyiv in 2008, 2009, and frankly, we weren't very impressed with the state of the Ukrainian army. But particularly since Russia took over Crimea in 2014, countries like the United Kingdom and other NATO countries have stepped up their intervention in terms of training and supplying the Ukrainians, and we have helped them gradually build up their capability. And in the last 6 months, particularly the last 3 months, those processes have been rapidly accelerated. As I mentioned before, and as your pictures show, the amounts of artillery, particularly long-range rocket artillery, have been flowing in to Ukraine. And of course, it's not just their physical possession of those weapons, it's actually understanding how to use them. And that's why training is going on in the United Kingdom, training is going on elsewhere in countries close to Ukraine, but we're rapidly trying to help them build up their capability. And of course, the other thing that's really, really important, it's not just knowing how to operate weapons and how to operate tanks and low-level infantry tactics and whatever. There has to be an understanding of the operational level of command, how to put together a major counter-offensive, how to integrate their remaining air power with their land power, how to integrate their artillery with their tanks and their armoured infantry. All that's really, really important. So there's many levels at which we, the West, particularly the United Kingdom, are engaging with the Ukrainians to help them rapidly increase their military capability, so that in the first instance, they don't lose, and in the second instance, they're able to then hold the majority of their country, probably with the exception of Donbass, and I have to say the Crimea, but to hold the rest of that country so that that can stabilize over time, peace can return, and reconstruction can start, and there can be a decent future for most of Ukraine. Frankly, and I sound negative in this, I don't see how the Russians will ever leave Donbass or Crimea. The world might tell them to go, but the Ukrainians will not be strong enough to throw them out. The Russians will not go voluntarily, and the West will not mount an Iraq, Kuwait type operation as per 1990, 1991, or 2003. That just won't happen. So the new reality, and Zelensky won't like it, is probably that part of his country will remain in Russian occupation.
There you are, the reality of the Ukrainian war, as spelt out by General Lord Dannatt there. General, really appreciate your take and your analysis on things. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Great to hear from you. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So that's why that conflict is our conflict as well, and it should be kept up there in the news.
It should, and, you know, credit to exactly what they've said to all of us to make sure that it doesn't fall off the news agenda, because it's so intrinsically linked to all of the stories that we've been talking about this morning, the cost of living, the cost of oil, our food, those grain supplies, all of it absolutely of paramount importance.
OK, we'll take a break there. And then we've got a hit on the newspapers. Ali Mirage, Stephanie Tekchi, going through those right after this short break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So many juicy stories in the papers today. Going through those now is arts and culture broadcaster Stephanie Tetchy and columnist at The Article, that's Mr. Ali Marash.
Well, a very good morning to both of you. Why don't we start, Ali, with you and the front page of the FT, page 2, just the inside cover. Talking about the inequalities in education. What's new?
Well, nothing's really new. I mean, we knew that inequalities in terms of your family background is going to affect your life chances. But what it's saying, and this is the Institute of Fiscal Studies, is basically saying that less than half of children on free school meals left primary school with a good level of attainment, compared to 70% of people from better backgrounds. And then those who did actually go on, 40% of disadvantaged students got good GCSEs, 5 or more in English and maths, compared with 60% from other families. So again, it shows that your family background is the primary determinant of your life chances. Now, that is no revelation. This is something that Alan Milburn, when he was social mobility czar years ago, identified. The question is, how do we deal with this? And this really comes down to standards in education that should be maintained to a robust level so that people can actually achieve the best and then go on to actually fulfill their potential. I think that's what we need, rather than this reverse social engineering, which is now creeping in, where we try and dumb down standards to try and address social mobility that way. Look, we all understand that you need to, at the fringes, help people who may be slightly, have slightly less grades than some of their peers from better backgrounds. But fundamentally, you need to maintain standards to a certain degree and a high level to really help those kids in the long term.
And I feel like their parents need support as well in learning how to educate their kids better, because I think, sometimes I see the difference with my friends who actually actively take an active part with their children and teaching them and investing in them. They do well in education. And then I see other people where they kind of just leave their children to school and the school will teach them and do everything like that. I think parents need to take on a hands-on approach with their kids' education. I think that helps.
You see, you and I were talking earlier, we were both from very ordinary backgrounds. And I got to grammar school. I don't know how. I wasn't from an academic household. But the more I look at it, the more I listen to Ali and those stats and whatever, the more it quite frightens me, the more I feel I was just very, very lucky. I mean, my parents sent us to school. Nothing happened when we got back home. There were no books in the house. They didn't sit and do your Latin homework with you or whatever. God bless them. I mean, they were uneducated people. But I look and I think, I was just really lucky.
I feel the same, and I think that's why a lot of people who do come from disadvantaged backgrounds, when they find themselves in quite prestigious academics or schools, they feel like they've got imposter syndrome because they feel like they don't belong there. They just feel like, a bit of deer in headlights effect.
That's the story of my life, basically. I mean, you become a member of a club that you sort of think you shouldn't really be there. But then I was very, very lucky. At 19, I got into television, and I was a member of a club where I shouldn't have been as well, and sort of stayed there.
It's still here.
Still here. But that's why it's just what you're saying, Ali, is you've got to set the foundations to even things up and to give kids a chance, because education, I mean, where Blair's right in a way is that education does improve, but what you cannot do is to say that everybody who isn't educated to third level is useless in society, not of any use in society, because he's created a whole terrible void in society where you can't get dental nurses, you can't get hairdressers, you can't get motor mechanics, you can't get bricklayers, because these people are sort of told that, well, this isn't a worthwhile profession. This isn't a worthwhile thing to be doing.
Well, I'm glad, Eamonn, that you mentioned hairdressers, something that I use very often, as you know. But no, it's a serious point. I think there are two issues here. One is you need to maintain standards at the very highest level. And look, I am a fan of Catherine Burblesing, who she's the social mobility czar now and runs a school in Wembley Park called Michaela. And it's a comprehensive state school. It takes kids from completely different backgrounds. But when you go there, the standards in that school are rigorous. And she's actually produced a film recently, The Unspeakable Truth About Children, which really showed that you maintain standards at the highest level. You expect the best from your kids, and they will go on to achieve. It's the dumbing down and the soft bigotry of low expectations that doesn't help. But on to your point,
But
Eamonn,
who's doing that dumbing down?
well, the dumbing down is happening in a lot of schools because it's this sort of patronising paternalist approach. Oh, you come from a tough background. You've done well to just get to school today, given your parental background. Burblesing's approach is no, we expect the same standards from everyone. And also, when you go to school, you've got to actually put stuff into someone's brain. You can't just expect kids to just know stuff already or teachers to extract. You've got to give them the foundations, the scaffolding to actually have discipline, focus, rigorous standards, and really attainment at the highest level.
You have to inspire kids to want to learn, though, as well. That is a big thing.
Exactly. But, Eamonn, to your point on the Blair thing, he talked about 50% of people going to university, and I think that's another issue where you don't have an apprenticeship program in this country that is really world-class. You look at Germany, they send people, they collaborate with industry. It's like an alternative to going to university. We have dumbed that down. That needs to also be, again, brought up. So it's not just about going to university. Some people then coming out and not getting great jobs after spending, over £9,000 on tuition fees every year.
I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about in that, but I do also remember, although my parents weren't academic, they had this incredible pride that I'd got to grammar school and my elder brother had got to grammar school as well, and by heck, we were going to follow the rules there, and it was things like, I would have qualified for free school meals, but my dad would have worked extra to make sure that we didn't have free school meals because their pride was such that they couldn't see that. And for instance, the school uniform, the idea, there were kids from much better off families than we were from, and they wouldn't wear the school blazer or have holes in their elbows, whatever. It's not us. No, we had our school uniform correctly, but also the school implemented standards during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And, I'm very blessed and very lucky to have gone to St Malachy's College and it stayed with me throughout the rest of my life, everything that they instilled in
It
me.
really does set the foundations for your future, your school education, because I was going to school in the 90s and, I just felt it was very much a lot of stereotyping, he's just the bad boy in the corner, he's not going to learn, and then you just see him being felled by the school system, and then he goes on to do crime, and all you needed was that teacher just to invest a little bit more.
In primary school, again, very working class, there were 42 pupils in my primary school class. 8 of us passed the 11 plus, right? 42. I mean, now you'd have, 20 maximum, something like that. And I was looking at a list in one of the Sunday papers of classics that you should read before you die, whatever it is, and there were 20 of them. And at my primary school, I had read 8 of them at primary school. And my primary school teacher always remember that enthusiasm, that trying to encourage you to say, enjoy this reading, enjoy what you're doing here, give you that appetite for what you're doing. I mean, teachers, it's like everything else. We've got to appreciate them. We've got to appreciate them.
We do.
Right.
Should we look at another group of people to be appreciated? Doctors in our NHS.
Definitely.
But there is, Stephanie, a more unconventional method perhaps available on our National Health Service.
Yes, there is. So NHS Trust in Manchester, the Manchester University Trust, is being slammed for quackery because they have put an advert looking for a Reiki therapist. The person will get paid £26,000 a year, and this is to help send good healing energy to cancer patients. A lot lot of people saying there's no scientific research to support that Reiki works for people, so why is this money going towards it and why is the NHS endorsing this? But, you know, in this kind of generation where people are finding new health methods, new ways to alleviate pain, I think it's actually quite interesting and it's quite open-minded of the NHS to look for these kind of forms of healing, because people are doing it outside of the NHS, so why not within the NHS?
Well, I can see if the scientific findings aren't there to justify it, but I have Reiki 6 times a year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I have no idea if it does me any good, but I think it does, you know? So that you get, you know, I have a woman who runs her hands, and doesn't touch me, you know, whatever, and she'll go into a sort of trance and I'll just lie there and I'll relax. Do I feel better off it? Yes, I feel, but I have no idea. I have nothing to prove.
Do you know, I've just opened up the job advert. It says, an exciting opportunity has arisen for a spiritual healer / therapist to join our friendly and energetic team. Remember how we said earlier? Energetic team. We're looking for committed, enthusiastic and a self-motivated therapist to join our well-established team. So there we go, the advert's
You ever
there.
had it, Ali?
You can have a look at it.
I haven't actually, no. I do yoga occasionally, and I also have had massage in the past, which is all helpful to one's well-being, because we do lead increasingly stressed-out lives, constantly running on this treadmill. I'm not sure to what end. So I do think some of these alternative treatments are helpful. I'm not sure the NHS should be necessarily providing them, but I do think on a personal level...
Well, should they? Because it is the main duties of the job are to treat clients using energy principles.
Well, I think the NHS can help regulate it, because I think, you know, when you're not doing it within, like, a medical institution, you're kind of getting all these kind of... There could be frauds, there could be good ones, so there's no one who's really actually given it a medical seal of approval. So, you know, by getting this Reiki person in, there could be a chance where actually they might see it is improving people's attitudes and maybe health. I've done Reiki before, and I think it is quite relaxing. And it's one of those things, it gets you just to focus. You know, can you imagine if you've got cancer and you're constantly going for chemotherapy, you're always in this negative state of mind. So to have these kind of situations where you can actually have someone who's helping you feel a bit more positive and a bit more calm, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Do they ever say to you at the end, are you worrying about your dog or something? You know, they tell you, they sort of think, I wasn't, but maybe I will.
They focus on a particular area. They'll be like, you've got a lot of tension in your head. And I'm like, no, definitely. I do got tension in my head because there's a lot of
I don't need a
thoughts
Reiki healer. I just come on the papers with you and I'm utterly zen for the rest of the day.
Zen. You have no energy blockages, you see. That's it. You get all your chakras cleared.
In the papers, as we're reviewing in the Telegraph, an NHS spokesperson is quoted by saying there is no scientific evidence to support the use of Reiki as an effective clinical treatment on the NHS.
Which is probably true.
Yeah, it is true.
Stephanie, I want to talk about this Barbie doll.
Yes.
Rose Eileen Ellis, who a lot of people will remember from Strictly. So she's pairing up, well, she's involved in this creation of a new type of Barbie doll. Tell us more.
So Rose Eileen Ellis, she won Strictly last year. She was the first deaf contestant to take part and actually win the show. So now she's teamed up with Barbie, who are releasing a new diverse collection of Barbie dolls. There's going to be Ken, who's got vitiligo. There's going to be another Barbie who's in a wheelchair. And Rose's Barbie is actually going to have a hearing aid behind her ears. And I love this story because I know it's changed now for kids what their first port of call is, but for most little girls, their first port of call is Barbie. And to see that there could be now representation for deaf girls, I think it's a wonderful thing because, you know, when I was growing up in the 80s, Barbie was only one way. She was blonde and blue eyes. So now it's good to see that there's this new... Oh, what do you think, Rosie?
And just, I can imagine people at home saying, that is great that Barbie is now more inclusive, but we know that if Barbie was a real person, they wouldn't be able to stay alive because their dimensions wouldn't support human life. So would it be a brilliant step if Barbie said, we're going to create these dolls, but they're going to look like what your daughter's bodies are going to look like, rather than these unrealistically stick-thin plastic figures?
So it's a yes to the hearing aids, but a no to the physical form.
I'm questioning how the motives of Mattel in genuinely trying to be inclusive by saying, well, we'll add a sort of a hearing aid as an accessory, in fairness, but not saying we're actually going to have these dolls represent what what these children who'll be playing with them look like?
Well, I think that's the whole fantasy of Barbie. It's like, you know, when you look to models and you look to actresses, like, we know realistically we all don't look like that, but sometimes you just like to indulge into the fantasy of that kind of glamour of Barbie, because maybe if they done realistically how we all look like, it might not sell as well. But again, they're the ones who are setting the tone.
I used to have a lot of dolls when I was young. Action men. I had 12 action men. I had a practical platoon of action men. So I did in those days. Did you ever collect dolls?
No, I mean, I had a fair group of action men too when I was growing up, Spider-Man, etc. But I've still actually got, I'm sorry, I've never admitted this on national television, I've still got a teddy bear and I've got a fluffy white bunny. Sorry, I don't want to shock the viewers, but yes, I do. I mean, sort of as part of the childhood, it's there. My nieces and nephews now use it.
Yeah.
So, you know.
See, I have to think about that and I go, I never did have a teddy.
You missed out, Eamonn.
I know this is what I'm thinking. How did that happen? How did that even happen? Guys, got to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed. It's been a joy having Ali and Stephanie with us today. Come back soon, guys.
We will.
Thank you very much indeed.
And now it's 9 minutes to 9. The two Tory leadership candidates, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, are due to attend another hustings tonight in Perth as they both battle for number 10.
Well, both of them have pledged to tackle the issue of Scottish independence by taking a harder line against First Minister Nicola Sturgeon.
Now, we're joined now by Andrew Bowie, the MP for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine. Thank you very much for speaking to us. On your commute, it looks like you've pulled over. Thank you very much. Tell us, Rishi's plan to secure the union. Another former Cabinet Minister has become the third Tory MP now to defect from Rishi Sunak to Liz Truss just yesterday, partly because they believe that Liz Truss is the one who can, quote, secure the union.
Well, I'm sitting talking to you from Aberdeen in Scotland as a Scottish Conservative, and it's my view that Rishi Sunak is best placed to ensure Scotland's place at the heart of our United Kingdom for years to come. That's why I'm backing him. One of many reasons that I'm backing him, and that's why I'm speaking to you this morning. He's the one with a plan to ensure the Scottish Government is held more properly to account by the UK Parliament, that the Scottish Civil Service is held more to account by the UK Parliament, and that indeed UK ministers are held to account by Scottish parliamentary committees. We need to ensure that the UK government is as representative and as stands up for Scottish people as it does for people across the rest of the United Kingdom. That's one way that we're going to ensure Scotland remains at the heart of the UK. But the other is by taking the SNP on at the ballot box and beating them. Liz Truss a few weeks ago said that the best way to beat the SNP was to ignore them. I fundamentally disagree. You don't beat somebody by ignoring them. You beat them by winning the argument, and that's what Rishi Sunak will do.
Why hasn't that convinced, then, the former Welsh secretary who said, I've got to shift allegiances here and go and support Liz Truss?
That's a question you'll have to ask Alan as to his motivation for jumping ship and moving at this late stage. I fundamentally believe that Rishi is the one who's best placed to ensure Scotland's place at the heart of the Union. I have backed Rishi since day one. I think his plan for the economy, to get inflation under control. We've only heard this morning how inflation is running out of control and the impact that's having on individual people's wages across the country, detrimental impact. And that's why Rishi, getting inflation under control, growing the economy so we can then responsibly be in a position to cut taxes, is the sensible conservative action that we need from a leader, and indeed what he will do to ensure that the Scottish Government is held more to account. I think all of these are excellent policies, and frankly, why I think he'd be best placed to lead our country in the years moving forward.
They are excellent policies. Based on the polling that we were talking to our pollster about earlier this morning, it hasn't persuaded people. The polls have Liz Truss significantly far out in front. Why is it that Rishi Sunak isn't cutting through in the same way? And what advice would you have? You're on his team, you're in his campaign supporting him, to say we've got just shy of 3 weeks left, we can shift the dial here.
Well, if I just read polls and went on what Paul said, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'm a Scottish Conservative Member of Parliament. I should not be elected and shouldn't be representing my constituency in Westminster. So I think the only poll that really matters is the poll that will be unveiled on the 5th of September. That's the poll of Conservative Party members, when we all get to cast a ballot to choose our next leader. And what I'm seeing is when Rishi goes around the country and speaks to individual members and speaks to hustings and engages in events, is that people are convinced by his arguments, convinced by his pitch, and convinced that he's the person best placed to lead our country. I wouldn't put too much store by polls. As I said, if we went by polls, then I would be sitting here in front of you today.
OK, point made. We've got another hustings tonight in Perth, in Scotland, where there might be a little bit of fatigue in the leadership campaign. What new things are we going to hear from Rishi today?
No, it's all fatigue. We've got 3 weeks of this campaign to go. I'm sure that you're on the edge of your seat, riveted by every twist and turn of this leadership election. We're going to hear more from each candidate about what they're going to do to ensure Scotland's place at the heart of our United Kingdom. And you know what? I'm supporting Rishi. I really want him to win. But whoever wins this leadership election, the fact remains that Scotland is better economically, more secure, and the UK stands more tall in the world with Scotland's at its heart. And that's what Conservatives and Unionists believe, the length and breadth of this United Kingdom. And I think we'll be seeing and hearing much more of that in Perth this evening.
MP and supporting clearly Rishi Sunak. Andrew Bowie, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
We're going to take the break there, and after 9 o'clock, just after 9 o'clock, we're going to introduce you to a man who investigates and hunts down people who have said they have died. They've faked their own deaths, but then they have been caught out. How easy would it be to fake your own death and disappear off the planet, reinvent yourself? Have a think about that. But first, here's your weather forecast.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. We saw some heavy showers yesterday. There'll be further showers and even some thunderstorms in places today, but they won't affect everyone. They'll be hit and miss. There'll be some drier weather around, although it will stay fairly humid in the south, whilst fresher weather is now arriving into the north and northwest. Now, low pressure is in charge, and two main areas to watch out for this morning. One area of rain affecting central and eastern Scotland. That tends to fizzle out during the day, but it's going to stay damp in places throughout the day. Showers also getting going quite early across southwest England, South Wales, and then more widely these will develop across much of the rest of England and Wales. They'll be slow moving. There's a risk of hail and gusty winds, as well as some intense rain in a short space of time. Of course, that falling onto hard ground means that there's the risk of flash flooding. It's still humid in the south, mid-20s, whilst it's much fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A drying up process here, with brighter skies arriving by the afternoon for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and those clearer conditions spreading south overnight. So for Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, mostly dry overnight with some clear spells and feeling cooler, 10 to 12 Celsius. Whilst it's still warm and humid across the rest of England as well as Wales, with further heavy showers continuing during the early hours of Wednesday, and a wet start particularly for the likes of the Midlands into central southern England, southwest England, South Wales. Further showers then get going across the southeast as well as East Anglia. Could be again some intense thunderstorms about, but once more they'll be hit and miss. However, a drier and brighter day is expected for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, and later on for parts of Wales and the southwest. The sun makes a reappearance here, but temperatures back to around average. So more typical UK weather emerging through the next few days after that thundery breakdown. I think it will stay changeable at the end of the week, but certainly a much cooler feel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Sunak and Truss are urged to step up plans to deal with the worsening cost of living crisis.
Hello there, lovely to see you. It's just gone 9 o'clock. It's a Tuesday morning. It's the 16th of August. This is Breakfast on GB News, on television, on radio, online, with me, Eamonn, Holmes and Rosie Wright.
Well, here's what's leading the news this morning. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will face off again tonight at a leadership hustings in Perth in Scotland. They're going to be pressured to be more ambitious when it comes to their plans to tackle the rising cost of living.
Thunderstorms have begun hitting the country as the current heat wave draws to a close. The Met Office is warning of torrential downpours, flooding and travel disruption. Weather warnings remain in place for most of the country until tomorrow.
Shortly, we're going to be talking to the insurance investigator, John Saunders, who's travelled the world tracking down people who fake their own deaths, including, you'll definitely remember this, the famous canoe man, John Darwin.
Well, the thing about him is he thought he had got away with it, of course, and then he couldn't keep living this solitary life. He went back and he lived in a flat, I think, next to his own house and whatever. Then he turned himself in. But the thing was, it wasn't his life he really affected, it was his family, everybody around him. He ruined so many people's lives because they couldn't forgive him because they had gone through the grief process of thinking their dad had died.
Lying to your children that one of their parents has died is quite extraordinary. What happens that people get so desperate that they think that's the best course of action? We'll be finding out.
Yeah, we will be finding out. This man's name is John Saunders, so we've tracked him down. He's going to be in the studio very, very shortly. You can join in our discussions, which you've been doing today. By email is gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GB News. Former head of the British Army we were talking to 20 minutes ago, General Lord Dannatt. Excellent interview, John says. His suggestion that in time there must be negotiations and 15% of Ukraine will be lost to Russia sounds eminently realistic. Parallels with the island of Ireland are irresistible. Partition with 15% remaining part of the UK. I thought Lord Dannatt was fascinating. We were talking about keeping Ukraine in the news and that there was a noticeable decrease of
public interest, really, and reporting on what's happening there.
Yeah, and news programmes on that. But he was saying, look, basically, it's our war as well, because the cost of living crisis that we're going through, the fuel crisis that we're going through, is a lot of it is as a result of the Russian invasion.
It was absolutely fascinating. You can go back, actually, if you're ever watching us on our app, you can rewind, or on YouTube as well, and find us there.
That's a very good point. I wanted to say that if you're on your holidays, if you're heading off somewhere, and no matter where you are around the world, download that app, because if you're not near a television station, a satellite dish or whatever it is, the GB News app, there you can have, even if you aren't watching us live, which you can do, you can watch us live, or you can watch us in a catch-up environment as well.
Right now, 9:04. Pressure is increasing on the two candidates looking to become the next Prime Minister to come up with more ambitious plans, really, to tackle the rising cost of living.
So Truss and Sunak will face off tonight in Perth in Scotland in the wake of Labour announcing plans for a freeze on energy bills and a windfall tax.
Now, all of this as data reveals that bailiff evictions for missed rental payments have risen by 39% over 3 months.
Well, here's a social housing activist who says the situation is going to get worse.
Living crisis are only bitten when it's come to housing, and it's only going to get worse. I mean, last time I was talking about the state of social housing. Now I'm here talking about how bad the private rented sector is getting, and it's only going to get worse. I mean, we're seeing evictions going up. We're seeing non-fault evictions going up. We're seeing people not being able to afford feed themselves, never mind afford their rent, and they're losing the roof over their heads. And what's ultimately going to happen is when people can't afford to rent privately, they're going to fall onto a social sector, which last time I was on, I explained, is already stretched as it is. I mean, demand just doesn't meet supply when it comes to social housing, and we've got 1 million people on the waiting list as it is.
As it is. What's the relationship, Kwejo, would you say, between tenant and landlord these days? I'm only speaking anecdotally, whether it's in the private market or the public market. And I tell you, they seem to hate each other. There's a lot of mistrust.
Absolutely, and I think it's only getting worse. And listen, I know I'm a housing campaigner, and I'm not going to say all landlords are the same, because that would be wrong for me to say, but what we are seeing is just how bad things are, and there definitely is a power imbalance. When we see regulation, when we see the rights of tenants, there's a massive power imbalance, and it favours landlords, unfortunately.
What do they bring to the party? I mean, they will say, you know, if it wasn't for us, there'd be more people who are homeless and whatever. But I'll tell you what, if you are a landlord and you are looking for tenants in the months and years ahead, you're going to have to maybe have more understanding than has been demonstrated to date.
I mean, absolutely, because like I mentioned earlier, evictions are going up and people are being made homeless. I mean, it's record levels. And when we talk about landlords and tenants, I'll give you an example. Last few days, I found out from someone, they went to view a privately rented property, and I think it was around 2,250 was the asking price by their landlord. 29.
Wait a minute, but this is per month.
Per month,
right,
month.
Yeah.
And the landlord...
there it is there on screen, there's the...
Yeah, I mean, 29 other tenants went to view the property. What the landlord then said is because so many have come, now you all need to bid against each other, and it's the highest bidder that will take the property and pay that amount every month. During a cost of living crisis, that's completely unacceptable. We're now exploiting, or there's landlords out there, not all of them, exploiting the situation where people are suffering and vulnerable to fatten their own pockets. And it is selfishness and greed, unfortunately. And I know that's the way the world works, but it's not right.
The reality is, we were talking about the bailiffs arriving and evictions up 40%. You've probably seen this firsthand. I've never had to witness this. That must be a sorry sight.
It is. I mean, and I go into tenants' homes on a daily basis and speak to tenants on a daily basis. And I mean, it's becoming a point now where tenants are having to borrow off of their kids to pay for food, because they just can't afford their bills, they can't afford their rent and everything else on top of that. They're having to turn to their own children in order to get some sort of money just to feed themselves. And with this going on in housing, and I mean, we've heard nothing, barely anything from the potential future prime ministers on this. They don't get the situation with housing. And I don't know whether it's a thing where they don't understand it, because you don't need to be a rocket scientist to get the basics of how housing's working in the crisis at the moment. But they just don't seem to care about the elephant in the room. And that's the situation we're seeing now when people living in disrepair.
OK, but you tell me what politician does get it.
Oh, that's a good question.
Because over the years I haven't seen whatever they say, whatever they do. Then you get, the present Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying, yes, well, here's a good election ploy. Let's sell off remaining stock of social housing. What an awful thing to be offering at this time.
Absolutely, and I mean, they're still going to push that idea, even when we can see people cannot even afford their rent, never mind trying to get on a broken property ladder as it is. It's just a promise that won't be delivered. And listen, I don't work in housing, I don't work in government, but I can tell you that for free as a campaigner and doing this work and seeing the extent to how bad things are when it comes to housing over the last year. What they're promising cannot be delivered, and they need to address the elephant in the room, because otherwise this is going to get worse. And it's whether they're going to address it now or wait for the system to completely collapse, because it will collapse.
Kwejo Twain-Boa speaking to us a little bit earlier. He is a social housing activist.
Right now, it is 9:09, and for over 30 years, insurance investigator John Saunders has travelled the world tracking down crooks who faked their own deaths. He's been to an astonishing 83 countries trying to find people, and even worked on the famous canoe man John Darwin case.
Well, John has got a book which sums it all up, which basically says, go away, I'm dead, except they're not. John Saunders is with us now. Good to see you, John.
Good morning.
John, how hard or easy is it to disappear off the planet?
For someone who's British, born here, with family here, it's very difficult because, for instance, if I wanted to fake my death and I'd say went to Spain, I'd likely to bump into a friend of mine one day and he mentioned he went to my funeral and I just hoped the beer flowed. But if I came from, say, from an immigrant family, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Ghana, I have family abroad. I could go and, say, fake my death in Delhi and then live with family members in Mumbai, sort of thousands of miles away. So that's easier there. And then you go along, get a doctor to give you a certificate. You either pay the doctor or convince him that someone died, and he gives you a certificate. You register the death and then put an insurance claim in.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of strategies have people tried? Because you've caught many people who've tried to sort of pull the wool over people's eyes.
Well, disappearing at sea, I mean, obviously the canoe man, but disappearing at sea was popular at one stage. I think just before the canoe man, a year or so before that, I had 3 people who disappeared at sea, and surveillance of the partner, the wife, who was also the claimant, revealed the whereabouts of all 3 people, and they all ended up in prison. So
yeah. Now, when you say claimant there as well, I mean, obviously insurance payouts are a big part of all of this. But Rosie and I were talking earlier as to people's motivation. Why basically do people want to disappear? It can't always be about money, or is it?
Mostly it's about money. People are in debt. Fear of losing their house, and maybe there's an endowment policy covering the mortgage. I've known people fake their death when they were due to appear in court. And the famous case of Pike, who was due in court for money laundering in Kent, and his wife went to the court with his Kenyan death certificate, and the case was dropped. He'd have got away with that had he not been stupid enough to take out 4 large policies 2 months beforehand. And the death certificate was, I knew it to be, it was fake. And criminals, there are criminals who set it up to steal money.
Now, look, okay, that's the general tactics of it all. What about the specifics? There is a Greek dentist who you particularly want to tell us about, who faked his own death. How hard was he to find? Tell us about him.
Well, it's not a question of finding people, because often I go abroad, I go to the police, look at the police report, the doctor's report, the registration, the cemetery, and show that the documents are fake. Finding people is not easy, but in his case, he was a dentist in a large practice in Barnstaple, and he was of Greek origin, allegedly, and he died in a road traffic accident, allegedly, in Amman, in Jordan. And his wife put the claim in, and she was backed up by a banking representative who had been quite close to Mr. Parissis with his finances. And it was Sophie, so I interviewed her, and the banking rep was there, and the wife, the wife was Stiliani. She cried and was very upset. And later I got a phone call from the bank rep who said, well, Mr. Saunders, you don't understand real grief. I said, right. And said, I phoned the Greek embassy, and they said the death certificate from Greece is genuine. I said, well, I know it is, because basically, had they taken the documents from Jordan to Greece, they'd accept them. But the answer lies not in Greece, but lied in Jordan. And she said, not only that, she said, I rang the Greek embassy in Amman, and they know about his death. He is dead. So you waste your time investigating this. You don't understand what you're doing, pay up. So I said to the bank, please get off my back. So I went to Greece, and yes, all the documents were genuine, but I went further into the registry and found that when he married, his name was something like Sarifis, which actually is a Jordanian name. Of course, he is Jordanian. So where did the name Parissis come from? And it showed his father's name, and out of all the documents now, his father had 3 different names, which is interesting. So I then went to Jordan, and the documents were all fake. There were no officials involved in Jordan. This man was a master forger. What I missed out is he actually left the job in Barnstaple and was starting a new one in Bristol.
So what's the penalty for being caught for someone like him?
Well, I think he got 5 years in the end. But what was interesting was that he was found in Scotland using the name McLaren. And I don't think the police really know who he is, but he qualified as a dentist in Athens in April as Parissis, and the next month he qualified as McLaren.
What's extraordinary is this sort of web of people you have to involve in it. You know, often, as you just mentioned in those cases, the wives. When do you get a hunch in those interviews?
Well, in that case, I don't think the truth will ever come out. But just interviewing, I think. Bear in mind, I interview many people who put a claim in because it's not easy when you get documents from abroad. And I understand the procedures in various countries, and I would say within 15 minutes, I know in 90% of the cases whether it's genuine or not.
Really?
And if it is genuine, I can expedite it, and the insurance companies pay up very quickly. So it works quite beneficial to genuine people. But if it's not, if it's suspicious, then I ask for further documents, and sometimes they go away, they're not forthcoming. And when they come in, then I can look at them and say, yes, it's necessary to go abroad.
But John, you are very forensic about all of this, and it is a job, and there you are representing banks and insurance companies and whatever for all of this. Do you ever, my friend, have sympathy with the person who is trying to disappear?
Disappear or die?
Or die, yes. Well, see him.
I did. I remember one gentleman went to see him one day. He was of Pakistani origin, very well spoken, lovely children. His wife had died in a horrific car crash, substantial sum assured. I interviewed him, he showed me photographs of the family, the car, his children were there, and there was no doubt his wife had died in his car crash. But something didn't ring true about her family and where that she'd changed her religion from Hindu, and they didn't know her family, and something didn't ring true. And there was a brand new Mercedes parked outside, and he was the driver of the CEO of PLC and so forth. He wanted me to interview the children, which I didn't like. So I made a few inquiries, and to cut a long story short, I went back to see him. His wife was dead. She died a year earlier. He came back to England, took out the insurance, then a few months later went back to Pakistan and got all the documents backdated. And I did feel sorry for him because they did have a genuine policy which had lapsed through non-payment at one stage. So there he was with two lovely children and no money. When I went back to see him the next time, he had an old taxi in the drive because he'd borrowed the Mercedes for the show. But for him, I did feel extremely sorry for him.
Well, it is incredible. Different people having different reasons to do what they do, and it's not as easy as it seems. But needless to say, if you have got an insurance claim, if somebody's dead and you're looking to collect money, then it would be, and we wouldn't really think about this, relatively standard practice that an investigator is put on the case just to make sure everything is as it should be.
Depending on the circumstances, generally, yes. And when I say an investigator, I go along and speak to genuine people and help them with all the documents, what they need, and the claim is paid quite quickly.
There you go.
Unless it's suspect.
Unless it's suspect. So it would be quite difficult for either of us, Rosie or myself, to disappear, to fake our own deaths.
Yes, it would be, yes.
It would be.
Because everyone would be looking for a Manchester United supporter, wouldn't they? And
no, see, the trouble is, they'd be looking at me, because every time someone meets me in real life, they think I'm George Clooney. So I sort of think I might have a chance. They just think, George, what are you doing here in the supermarket today?
I don't think you'd be able to stay quiet, Eamonn. That would be the problem. If you had to claim your own death, I think 5 minutes later you'd be itching.
There was a man who died in Honduras, and his neighbour phoned up and saw him in Sainsbury's in Canterbury.
Okay. He is ace investigator, insurance investigator, 30 years an insurance investigator. He is John Saunders. John has a book, Go Away, I'm Dead. Well, we say go away to you now, John. We've got to go away. We'll hit the break. We've got Liam Halligan with us talking about today's employment figures and what it means for the cost of living crisis right after this very short break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, look, the latest employment figures came out this morning, and they showed that the rate shrank between April and June. However, these figures also show that wages fell at the sharpest rate on record in the same period. Our economics editor, Liam Halligan, joins us now to explain. I don't really get that, Liam. I mean, there is such a demand for workers. How do the wages actually go down than up?
Bear with me, because it is a little bit complicated. But hopefully it all will become clear. The actual money you get, wages, the pounds and pence, are going up quickly. They're going up at 4.7% between April and June compared to April and June last year.
Yeah.
That's the fastest rate of increase for many, many years. But of course, as everyone knows, the cost of living is going up even more.
Yeah.
You got 4-5% increase in wages. You got 9-10% increase in inflation, price rises, the cost of living. So what we call real wages, wages after inflation, after the cost of living rise, are falling, and they're falling at their fastest pace in 20 years, even though the amount of pounds and pence you get is going up. Because everything's more expensive, your real standard of living, what economists call real wages, are falling, and they're falling sharply.
So what's the health of the job market right now?
The health of the job market is that there are lots of jobs, there are lots of vacancies. There are slightly less vacancies, Rosie, than there were 2 or 3 months ago. Now, that might be, that's good news, more people are taking those jobs, or it might be that employers, firms are getting nervous, so they're not advertising as much for new people. We don't quite know that yet, we need more data. But the thing is, even though there's lots of vacancies, as many GB News viewers will tell you, a lot of the jobs are in parts of the country where they're not, or lots of the jobs require skills that they or their kids may not have, unfortunately. So there's what we call a geographic and an occupational mismatch in this country, and has been for years. It's particularly acute now, between where the jobs are and what the jobs are, and where the people are and what they can do.
How much of that has got to do with Brexit, my friend? I ask that. I mean, did we lose a certain sector of the jobs market that we haven't been able to replace?
I think some of it is due to Brexit, in all fairness. However people voted, remain or leave, I think that's undeniably true, that some of this vacancy rate is because of Brexit, particularly in farming. Now, the National Farmers Union, I'll be talking about this more on my show at 1 p.m. The National Farmers Union have said this morning, they've brought out new figures showing records amount of food waste, stuff that we're growing on our farms that we can't harvest or pick because there aren't enough people to do that.
Yeah.
Now,
it's a travesty, that, isn't it?
Up until 2013, Eamonn, a lot of my ancestors, a lot of your ancestors, I don't know about the Holmeses, the Halligans first came to Ireland to pick potatoes in East Anglia from County Mayo. And we have had, over many, many years, an agricultural seasonal worker scheme where people have come from all over Europe, not so much Ireland these days, more from East Europe, but also elsewhere. That scheme ended back in the early 2010s when we had freedom of movement between the European Union and the UK. Now we don't have that because we've done Brexit. That seasonal agricultural worker scheme is now getting back up and running, But I talk to lots of farmers where I live in East Anglia, and they say that the admin is difficult and we're not quite getting the people through that we need to get through to come and help to pick the crops.
Well, what's the overall outlook then, Liam? I mean, we have a situation where so many, front page of the Mail today, Heathrow Airport, they can't find people to do the jobs that they want, for instance. We've got this employment void, this gap. We've got a lot of jobs. We've got less people looking for those jobs. We've got industry wanting people for the jobs. Where are we at, my friend?
Well, this is, of course, a cost of living crisis, but I'd also say, and I'm not trying to be controversial here, this is also a cost of lockdown crisis, Eamonn. If you lock down the economy for 2 years, if you pay people for 2 years not to go to work, don't be surprised when lots of them don't go back to work or don't get back to work the way they were before. There is a lot of controversy, not least in the civil service, but elsewhere, about whether people really are as productive when they're working from home a lot of the time. Now, I think we'd all feel that there should be some balance of work and home life, and perhaps it was too much in one direction before the pandemic, but maybe it's gone back the other way. So there are lots of issues we're still trying to resolve because of lockdown. The whole global economy, let alone just the UK labour market, hasn't quite got back into gear after this global pandemic, after we locked down the world economy. And that's a cause of a lot of this inflation, and it's a cause of a lot of these vacancies.
Liam, so much to unpack. Thank you so much. You'll be here
Always
on
a pleasure.
TV News 1 o'clock for On the Money, of course, so don't miss that later on. That's it from us, though, this morning.
Who's that guy there?
Some spud picker.
You can really see how tanned you are from your holiday, Liam, looking at that old picture as well.
Sunny Skegness.
Thanks for watching and listening today. We're going to be back in the morning to do it all again from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. Tom Harwood with a briefing up next. Thanks for watching.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Ada McGivern from the Met Office. We saw some heavy showers yesterday. There'll be further showers and even some thunderstorms in places today, but they won't affect everyone. They'll be hit and miss. There'll be some drier weather around, although it will stay fairly humid in the south, whilst fresher weather is now arriving into the north and northwest. Now, low pressure is in charge, and two main areas to watch out for this morning. One area of rain affecting central and eastern Scotland. That tends to fizzle out during the day, but it's going to stay damp in places throughout the day. Showers also getting going quite early across southwest England, South Wales, and then more widely these will develop across much of the rest of England and Wales. They'll be slow moving. There's a risk of hail and gusty winds, as well as some intense rain in a short space of time. Of course, that falling onto hard ground means that there's the risk of flash flooding. It's still humid in the south, mid-20s, whilst it's much fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A drying up process here, with brighter skies arriving by the afternoon for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and those clearer conditions spreading south overnight. So for Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, mostly dry overnight with some clear spells and feeling cooler, 10 to 12 Celsius. Whilst it's still warm and humid across the rest of England as well as Wales, with further heavy showers continuing during the early hours of Wednesday, and a wet start particularly for the likes of the Midlands into central southern England, southwest England, South Wales. Further showers then get going across the southeast as well as East Anglia. Could be again some intense thunderstorms about, but once more they'll be hit and miss. However, a drier and brighter day is expected for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, and later on for parts of Wales and the southwest. The sun makes a reappearance here, but temperatures back to around average. So more typical UK weather emerging through the next few days after that thundery break.